again, relying on the casting alone, at least right now, is not a sustainable position to be in. It just is not.
And I was like, holy shit, this game is gonna be massive.
At some point, we definitely crossed the sort of the €1,000 a day mark.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. As you can hear probably right now, it's gonna be a much different interview than what we usually have, especially considering the fact that I'm speaking in English, not in Polish, so przepraszam for that, but yeah, this is gonna be much different, and my today's guest is gonna be someone who definitely changed my life, I would say, for the better, because if not for Anders, I would probably not be sitting here casting esports games, firstly, and then moving into becoming a YouTuber, someone who, I mean, I would say is definitely a role model for a lot of casters out there, and someone who is definitely worth interviewing and getting to know too. So Anders, thank you for finding time to speak to me. It's an honor.
Yeah, you're super welcome. Thank you for the nice words. You know, it means a lot. Obviously been doing this job for a minute, so it's crazy sometimes how many people end up, listening to to Counter-Strike, over the years. It's good fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit different, right? From what, like, when I'm usually interviewing someone, it's like, yeah, I know these people because I worked with them or I had an opportunity to speak to them for a minute. With you, it's a lot different. Like, I was listening to you in a way that, like, I just listen, I look at these games and I pick up some caster calls, especially because when you were casting, like, a lot of these games that I was watching, 2014, 2015, I was 14, 15 back at the time, so I was very young, right? So it was much different. I wanted to go through your history as a caster, because my first contact that I had with you was on 2014, but I believe you started casting even before that, way before that, right? It was 2013. I think it was Ninjas in Pyjamas TV, something like that, right?
Yeah, I started a channel called Podcast in basically January in 2013, and then within I think a month, NIP reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to just do NIP TV instead? Can we do that?" And then we, I was like, "This is an insane opportunity. Let's go." But yeah, so basically for over 12 years now in total, yeah, 2013 to where we are now. So it's a long time.
I mean, it is a long time for sure. And what was the feeling back then? I mean, CS:GO was a completely different game than what it is right now. I believe CS in 2013, it was still a bit, I wouldn't say hated, but there was definitely a lot of skepticism around that game, I believe. There was, people were saying, yeah, the Molotov sucks, the game is not that good as CS 1.6 was. How do you remember that time?
I mean, I think I was even one of these people. I remember when Valve launched CS:GO, and it really wasn't Valve, remember, it was actually another company called Hidden Path that did the development for the sort of the first release. Not to put all the blame on them, but just to say that they released Dust, not even Dust 2, but Dust with cars that had fire coming out of them, and yeah, the Molotovs slowed you down to it. The Molotovs were insanely good. And I remember I took one look at it and I thought, these guys have no idea what Counter-Strike is. What's going on, right? This is, you would never release a game with those kind of particle effects and all the rest of it if you really knew what Counter-Strike was about. So anyway, for me, I was like, yeah, whatever, I'm out, But then, obviously, that's almost always kind of a stupid position to take. But I mean, I was a lot younger too, So then, yeah, but then I think more than that, really, that's on the game side. And obviously, Valve took over development of the game, and then it became a much better game pretty quickly. So that's one thing. But more interestingly, actually, in the esports community, there was a really, really big feeling that it didn't really matter how good or bad Counter-Strike was, because the future of esports was about RTS games and MOBA games. And really nobody thought that. I know this sounds so crazy, it's hard to make this sound believable, but nobody really thought that FPS games were going to come back and do something. People are like, what's the FPS games of the past? It's like Counter-Strike 1.6, like Quake. It's like
Quake.
yeah,
right.
People are saying like it's all done. Like nobody wants that anymore. Now it's about RTS games and MOBA games. And I remember arguing with so many people back then about it. I said like, I think you guys are totally wrong about this. But in a way, it's fortunate for me because it meant that nobody really wanted to, like nobody thought of Counter-Strike as like, oh, this is going to be a really big thing again, and it's going to be, we should all go here and do stuff. And like, so I was allowed to do a lot of work in the beginning where essentially nobody cared because, like today, if a new game comes out, there are a million, casters and analysts and hosts that want to be, the new guy in this. And I understand why. It's actually a really good idea if you want to be a caster to try and find a new game. Like, it's probably a smart way to do it. So, but that wasn't the case back then. Like, there was, people left over from 1.6 and Source, and, a couple of people maybe from other games who think it could be fun, but nobody thought it was going to blow up at all.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I felt it too, that there was a lot of skepticism. And also, I believe, at least in Poland, I don't know how it was for the rest of the world at least, the turning point, definitely for Poland, was obviously EMS1 Katowice 2014, because like VP won it, right? That's the like the first reason, but also the viewership was very good. The stickers obviously became legendary, like in the CS scene, like costing thousands of dollars, like tens of thousands. So it was a huge thing, but you weren't casting this specific major, right?
No.
Why was it? Because I remember that there was a lot of people that were supposed to, like, I'm not sure how about you, but there was Thorin was supposed to be there as well.
Yeah.
Remember the Polish drama that happened? Yeah. We are not gonna go into there. Like, sure. I want Polish people to stay here watching and listening. Why weren't you there? That's what I was wondering, because you were in Cologne for sure in 2014.
Why wasn't I there? Damn. This is it's probably one of those stories that I always thought, like, man, I'll probably never comment on this until, I just basically retire from esports. But I could do like I guess I could do like a light version of this story just because it's interesting, Okay. Like, basically what happened was that, like, so I was basically talking to someone for hiring, right? And there was like a lot of back and forth about, are you available? What's your day rate? How much is it going to cost to get you there, and all the rest of it. And I think we pretty much agreed on everything. We said, okay, it's all good. Like, yeah, of course I'm coming to the event, And then I got, like, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and I kind of just disconnected from all communication for a minute. I was like, I probably took like a week and a half or maybe 2 weeks or something where I was just really hard to get a hold of. And understandably, I think the people on the other end, obviously, they don't know what's going on, right? So for them, it's just like, come on, like, why is he not replying? Like, we're trying to run a show. We've got like a big production. We need to know, are you coming or not? So anyway, by the time, I got a message from, I think, Semler or somebody else, who said like, hey, they're kind of waiting for your reply. Like, what's going on here, And I said, okay, oh shit, you're right. Like, obviously, my bad. So I came back and I said, hey, listen, everything is all good. Like, as far as I know, we've agreed to, me coming and all the rest of it. And and I said like my number for my day rate, which I thought we had already agreed on. And it turned out I just misunderstood that number. And it was like, I quoted something that was like, I don't know, 200 euros higher than what they thought was reasonable. So it was, from my point of view, just purely a misunderstanding, Okay. But that ended up being kind of a bigger problem, and they just said like, hey, listen, you're not, we can't have you here anymore. And I remember thinking like, that's really crazy, like, surely we can just have a conversation about it. But the feeling, I think, was that, I'd already taken some time from answering and all the rest of it, and maybe that was my own fault in that sense. So yeah, anyway, they ended up sort of saying, hey, listen, we're going to go another direction with this. And that was like, it was a big moment for me, because I remember thinking, damn, like, I was obviously super sad about, like, not coming and everything. I was like, this is super upsetting. But I also remember thinking, man, I've also got to be a professional here, right? If I go crazy and nuclear and I say, this is unfair and I cannot believe it and so on, like, all I'm going to do is I'm going to show myself as being kind of an unreliable person to work with, right? Like, you don't really want to be seen as somebody who, it's like, oh shit, if we don't hire Anders, the whole world's going to burn down, right? So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna relax. I'm just gonna not do anything. I'm just gonna say it's not a problem, you know. And if people ask me, I'm just gonna say, "Oh, listen, you know, can't be at every event, you know." So that's what I did. I just you know chilled out and just thought, okay, it's not a big deal, you know. Obviously, that sounds like it's easy. It's not. Like, I think it's very hard to do. Most people, I think, end up freaking out when these things happen. So anyway, the thing that really got to me at the end of it really was like, I heard from a bunch of people who were at the event that obviously you're right, like the Thorin drama took over most things. Maybe that was good.
For sure, it did.
Maybe that was good for me at the end, you know, because there wasn't, I think, that much conversation about it. But what I got back from a lot of people that I even at the time knew who was actually working the event was that there was like a big rumor in the industry, apparently, that the reason I wasn't coming was because I had asked for like some absolutely insane day rate. Like I heard people quoting me figures saying, you know, we couldn't bring Anders because he, you know, it would cost like 5,000 or 6,000 euros a day to get him to the event. And I just remember thinking like that. I was super scared at that moment because I thought this is gonna be the end of my career. Like what if that becomes kind of like the industry news, the industry standard, then what am I like? How can I? You know, and I can't even fight it. I don't even know how this, you know, but I got that back from like 5 or 6 different people who messaged me and said, Anders, I don't understand what's going on. Like this, you gotta remember as well, like this is really early on. Like this isn't, you know,
2020.
Yeah, this isn't like the well-established like Anders and Semler of like 2015, 16. Like a lot happened between 14 and 16 in that sense. So I don't have some super big established career where everyone is like, you know, where I have my own voice and I can answer back or anything. I was just sat at home thinking, damn, this is kind of crazy, you know. But at the end of the day, I think what it kind of proved in many ways is that, you know, if you do good work and you just kind of move on and just don't, like, you know, don't try to make it a big drama thing. I also don't know how, I mean, again, like, I don't even know how the rumor started to begin with. And, you know, again, to be honest, I should have done a better job at, you know, reading my email and answering back. Or, you know, obviously I had my own things going on in my own life, but you know, at a minimum, you'd have to communicate that to other people, right? And say, hey, listen, I'm so sorry. I'm going to be a little bit late on replying, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, it's a big lesson for me early on. Not something that I really think about anymore, to be honest. But, I think there was a world in which if I had taken another path back then, like if I had said I'm going on Twitter and I'm writing angry tweets or something, that could have been really bad, I think. And I think it's a bad way to act in general, anyway. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, you should be thankful to yourself for like the Anders of 2014 that you didn't react the way that you maybe thought would be appropriate back then. I had a very similar situation. I would even say identical. There was and it was also a CS event because I casted League of Legends and CS, and I asked my friend who was working at the company that was supposed to hire me for this event, and he said, well, they are not gonna hire you because they heard you take 60,000 zloty, which is like equivalent of 15,000 euro per like a tournament. And I said, well, we live in Poland. I don't even take 10% of that. We are from Poland, mate. Like, what are we even talking about? Like, and this is I think this is the best way to put that rumors usually are just not true. Like, someone just put it out there. It was not true in your case. It was not true in my case. And you know, when people hear that, some of them are gonna be like, oh wow, really? It really happened. But the rest are just gonna be like, yeah, I know Anders, it didn't happen, right? Or I know Kasper didn't happen. So, I mean, you just have to, I guess, just live with it. I mean, it just happens. There's nothing we can do about it. Like you said, I mean, 2014 definitely was a crazy year, but you casted ESL 1 Cologne 2014. You were there with Semler, I believe. You were definitely casting the final. Not only that, I remember that during 2014, you casted a lot of games. Like, yeah, majors are important, but I remember, I even have the list right here. Give me a sec.
No
a
way.
lot of games like Face It's. Yeah, I actually do. It was Face It Cup January.
Yeah,
that's what happened. There was DreamHack Summer 2014, and it was a big, for me personally, it was a big event because VP were coming into this event as favorites, obviously, and they absolutely sucked in that event. They lost versus Navi in quarterfinals 2-0, if I remember correctly. and also it was just, you know, another event where NIP were just dominating, and they were just going crazy. And also, if I'm not mistaken, if we count Copenhagen games, DreamHack Summer, Gfinity, Face It, and all of this, it was definitely not the prime, but it was a real, like, a huge start of Anders and Sumner, right?
Yes, yeah, it really was. Like, I think, I don't know if it lasts into 2014, but I think I don't think people understand the scale of Counter-Strike we were involved with at the start of this whole thing. Like, when we did podcast and NIP TV at the start of, like, you know, like essentially at the start of CSGO, like in 2013, Semler and I would do, so the European games would start, it's not like today where it would start like now the European games like throughout the whole day. Back then they started basically towards the end of the, you know, at the end of the work day. So it'd be like around 5 or 6 Central European time. And then they would last until like about midnight-ish, depending on how many DDoS attacks and everything else there were. Sometimes it was later, but it would, so you had something like a 6 to 8 hour work day where there were like a bunch of games being played, and we would cast all of them. So literally all the European Counter-Strike that was being played, we pretty much cast, you know, and then we would stay up and cast all the American games. So we would literally cover sort of the entire, you know, clock around for like, you know, 12 or more hours, and then I would go to bed, and then I would wake up and do the same thing, like over and over and over again. So I think every player that played, every team that existed, like I think I cast all of them at the start, which was, looking back, is insane, especially because again nobody was really paying us to do this, right? Like I wasn't like we were getting paid in Twitch ad revenue. That was it. There's nothing else was going on in that sense. Obviously you go to LANs, it's different, but that's like something you have to learn as well. How much should it cost and all the rest of it. There's like a lot of history in that probably is, some of it also kind of hard to tell at the moment, but you know, there was a lot of improvement in the industry that had to be done. At the beginning when we went to LAN, Samler and I were being put into like one hotel room together, which is not, it's not a crazy idea really from like a, you know, budget perspective for an event. It's a lot to buy. It's different, right? You buy 2 hotel rooms for everybody, right? But at the same time, if one guy gets sick, or if one guy's having, you know, a rough time sleeping, or if one guy is partying until it's too early in the morning and comes back, you know, like there's all this stuff happening, right? You don't want the whole event to be this. So anyway, we had to do all these different sort of battles to say, hey, we need things to get better, and we did a lot of that. But yeah, I would say in the beginning, right at the beginning, I was casting with a bunch of different people, right? So I would call up Hiko, I would call up like, you know, Devil Walk or Freiber. I would call like different people and say, hey, do you want to come, you know, just join me tonight for the broadcast for a little bit? And then I would just be talking to those people. And after I run into Semno, I just realized this is so much better if we're just working together, and we can, you know, have a good partnership, and we have the reliability of always being around, and, you know, we just always know what we're doing. And obviously we just love talking and hanging out and talking about Counter-Strike, you know. So yeah, there was some point on there where we basically said, this is it, you know, like this is what it is. And yeah, I guess around 2014 would have been the time where that really started to like take some more runway.
I'm glad you started the conversation about the hotel point, because I remember the story of Richard Lewis and Henry G in the same hotel room. It's one of the better stories I heard. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Henry G back there, but yeah, it was definitely crazy. And yeah, you were right, I think. I mean, like you said, there was a lot of still good times for CS to come. And yeah, I remember 2014, and especially ESL 1 Cologne specifically, because I think everyone who knows you remember that because of the 2 caster calls that you made in ESL 1 Cologne. Obviously, both regarding Hiko in that situation. Like, it was more of a spontaneous thing, I believe, at least listening to that. So it just all came out spontaneous. It was not prepared.
Yeah, I think yeah, they both were spontaneous, but I didn't even realize the inhuman reactions thing until neither one of them afterwards. I didn't think it would be a thing. Like, it was just a thing that I said, and then it wasn't until I checked social media or something, like maybe even and with like, are you kidding me? Thing, I didn't think about it either. I think it wasn't until like more people started to pick up on it and sort of said, man, you know, here's a thing that Anders is saying, you know, and I'm like, oh, I guess I am saying that, you know. So I didn't really think about it. This is something I've noticed in casting, because you can really prepare things, and I do that sometimes. Sometimes I'll sit down and I will think about, like, here's a name, here's a situation, here's, like, a story that I want to tell. Can I tell that in reference to, like, that absolutely, for me at least, I think it's one of the really fun things about being a caster is you can have sort of like a thing ready, and the hard thing is sometimes you have a thing ready for years and you never get a chance to use it, and you just have to say, well, it's just out there waiting, you know, and that can be annoying. But I've noticed that sometimes the best work you do is when you almost, kind of like, you've almost lost control of the situation, basically. And I think something that's a bit dangerous sometimes as a caster is if you try to, like, hold on, like, almost too much to the thing, you know, and you're, like, you know, you're trying to, like, be in total. Sometimes it's nice to say, I'm gonna start a sentence here and I have no idea where we're going, but, like, I trust myself to find out when the game is happening, and we're just gonna roll into it. And some of those moments, obviously, the Hiko, the like inhuman reactions thing is so, that's so, you couldn't plan that, right? Like, it's like it happens too quickly, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 2v4. No one thought he would even win the round, right? I mean, it was just like an inhuman retake, I would say, in this specific situation. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the inhuman reaction post. I missed the game, and then there was a YouTube video that popped out on my feed. It was called "Inhuman Erections," and I clicked on it, and then yeah, when I saw it, I was like, okay, so that's what happened in this game. I mean, to be fair, to me at least, maybe I'm just one of the few people, but yeah, people remember the Hiko situation from the Dignitas game. They remember the inhuman reactions from the NIP game, but there were so many highlights reel throughout the series. The Freiberg situation with 5-7 in Cobblestone as well. To me, at least, one of the most iconic like highlights that happened, because looking back 10 years later, if he hadn't won that round, probably NIP wouldn't have won that major as well, because it was like they won this Cobblestone. I think it was 16-14, right? And it was an eco as well, so it changed the whole situation.
You know, that is something that actually, you know, when I think about like Counter-Strike history, which I do probably way too much, like. That's something that's like the most scary idea is the really, really real chance that NIP team never won a major. And just because I know the guys and everything, like, that would have been, I can't imagine like the level of heartbreak we would all have to look back on. Like, I think we can all look back and we can say, one, they obviously should have won the first major. Like that, like They were super destined to win that one, right? Like where they lost to Fnatic, and that still is like something that probably, like, some part of me wants to go back and kind of retell the story of how insane that was. Like, I watched that Fnatic team play in China, like right when it was formed. It was right when they just got, oh, why am I blanking on his name? New IGL Pronex. They just got Pronex into the team.
Yeah,
and that was like pretty close to the major. You're like, that was just, and I remember seeing them in China and I thought, I mean, like, this is, you know, what are these guys gonna do? And they got Devil Walk, who is kind of a comedian in his own way, and, you know, maybe not touted, I think, really as the best player either. I was like, who the fuck is Devil Walk, you know? And then they win the major and kind of steal it away from this team who were CSGO. Like, this team was the only thing that, like, carried you. This is another thing that people don't think about. I really thought in the beginning, I thought, holy shit, if Forrest or Get-Right retire now, the game is over. Like, from an esports perspective, like, if these guys carry so much, because all the other famous players that, obviously, I spent a lot of my life in 1.6 too. So obviously, if, you know, people like, you know, Pasha and Taz and Neo and Cuban, and I would even say, like, you know, Lord or some of these other, Luke, you know, back in the day, like some of these other players, like, we knew about these players, right? But they hadn't really made it into CSGO is the problem, right? So most of them they were playing CS, but it was more like reluctantly. They were sort of, yeah, I guess we have to, you know. They weren't like committed to it the way that the NIP team was. So the scary idea was, man, if this NIP team just decides to quit, then like, are they the only people that really care about the game? Man, it took a long time before other people started to say, okay, we are going to take this seriously. And obviously when they did, that's when things really changed and became better. So yeah, if just to say, if that NIP team that put so much effort into lifting the beginning of CSGO, if they never won a major, I don't know. It's very, very heartbreaking for me if that hadn't happened. Like looking back, I'm very thankful that happened.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said. Even Pasha said it himself, coming back into that point from like coming into CSGO from 1.6. He said that he wanted to quit. He said that he even talked with his wife, and she said that. Well, he talked with his friends, and they said, yeah, Pasha, you need to join a normal life, like he said. Like, you know, a casual life. And he talked with Neo and Taz, and Neo and Taz just basically said, yeah, just give it a shot. Like, CSGO is going to become big, give it a shot, and, well, look where we are right now, right? So, yeah, definitely a lot of change. And I also think that the reason why they weren't big, like Pasha and Neo, I mean, they were playing in Universal Soldiers, right? There was a team called Universal Soldiers. And everyone was like, well, who the fuck is Universal Soldiers? Like, yeah, we know it's Pasha, Neo, but they are not like getting any success, right? When they get into the VP lineup, then they won the major instantly. And VP basically, like in Poland at least, like from that point on, even though the organization is Russian, obviously, like everyone is still talking about Virtus.Pro. Today we have like Snacks in G2, Shuchy was in Mouse, right now he's out of Mouse. Ultimate is in Team Liquid. No, I mean, people care about that, but everyone is like, yeah, you remember Virtus.Pro days, right? Everyone is like, yeah, Virtus.Pro, because it was basically like the legendary lineup that did have success in CSGO. And coming back into the Ninjas in Pyjamas conversation that we are having, I think they should have won too. To be fair, they should have won the one in Sweden in versus LDLC. I feel like it was like honestly, they had it. Like, especially on Overpass, I feel like it was meant to be. Michael Ella just coming in, being a stand-in, playing lights out. He was insane back then for this short amount of time. And then, obviously, like, a lot of people are saying that the one that they shouldn't have won is versus Virtus.Pro. But I did have this a little bit of fear the moment on the second map. They were losing. It was 1-0 for VP. On the second map, VP were winning like 11-4, and I think it went into 11-9. And it was Inferno T-side, and Inferno T-side obviously being as city-sided as it was. I mean, it was scary, and there was a situation where I think Neo and Pasha were left in a 2v3. Neo was on 4 health, Pasha was hungry, he died instantly, and Neo just won a 1v2, and basically, that was, I feel like this was the only reason why they... I wouldn't say steal this win because it was a 2-0 in the end, pretty convincing 2-0, but it was really stressful to look at these games, like especially because it was my first game that I've seen live, and looking back at it right now, I feel like, well, I didn't really understand what was going on. I felt like, yeah, they are in the lead for sure, they're gonna win, right? But yeah, there was a lot of stressful moments, and like even Fiflarin said, like I think right after Katowice ended, he said like, yeah, we just weren't hitting our shots. And Forrest said it in the Red Bull documentary. He said that, yeah, this is the only major that we got stumped, basically. Like we weren't able to do anything. And I agree with that one as well. But the next major that we have on our list, and is the one that I want to talk about the most, is obviously the most controversial one, because like DreamHack Winter 2014, to me, the biggest major that happened because of the Olaf boost, but also because like the stories. I mean, yeah, people think about Olaf boost, but to us Poles, especially to me, the Virtus.Pro games there, I mean, it is one to this day of the most heartbreaking defeats. Obviously, nothing is beating the Astralis loss, but still, like when you think about it, they were winning 15-7 versus NIP on Nuke. You were casting this game with Semler and Moses, or only Semler, something like that. I don't, yeah, they were winning 15-7, and they lost it 22-20. Yeah, in this map, like it is really heartbreaking, especially considering that they won the second map there. Yeah, that's so, like, it's so hard to believe, isn't it? Like, yeah, it was. I mean, what is your thoughts on that? And also, I'm gonna have one more question, like on what was your, because obviously you casted Fnatic versus LDLC.
Yeah.
Like we have to talk. Like it is impossible to just not mention it. What is the feeling?
I mean, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
on the VP stuff, right? On the like, I think this was one of the insanely charming things about this, like the VP lineup, was the fact that they just, obviously the personality thing is out of control, right? Like with Pasha and Taz in one team, like you really can't have like more personality in a team, like outward, like it's something that a lot of modern teams miss, obviously, in my opinion. They're just really funny characters, they're really funny people, so obviously a lot of people are going to care about them to begin with. But then you had, because there were so many different people who kind of at any one moment could have been taking the roles of leadership in this team, right? Like at moments it was Taz trying to do the IGLing. Sometimes I think for when they won the major, it was Neo.
It was Neo.
Yeah. But that in itself was a super alien concept. Like other teams didn't have different IGLs that could try to sort of, do leadership things, And as a result, sometimes the team was either, like this is how we came up with the concept of like the Virtus.Pro, right? Like it's the idea that like, sometimes when it worked, it was crazy, and they really did just run through teams, and like even beating teams where you say, well, this team should be better and they should have better individuals or whatever, but like somehow in certain moments it didn't matter. And obviously the problem is the other side of that is when things stop working, they could really stop working for in a critical way, and that happens sometimes. But in a way, from like a viewership point of view, that made it so much more dramatic to watch their games. So like I totally understand why people are still talking about this lineup, but like years later. And obviously I'm unbelievably biased because I think for me, Neo and Forest are the two people that I think about when I think of Counter-Strike 1.6, and it's very, very hard for me to figure out who's on top of that. I mean, I'm probably tilted a bit towards Neo just because he basically has worse teammates than Forest.
Yeah, I remember that Thorin talked about it as well, right? And I think he did a whole like 2-hour essay video about who is the GOAT of 1.6, and he basically said what you said in these few seconds. That I mean it's very hard to tell, but if he had to choose someone, he would probably choose Neo.
Yeah, and it's probably really hard to communicate to people. I think now, if some of you didn't watch 1.6, it's hard to give you the feeling of what Neo was doing in 1.6, but it's not just like the shooting and everything else. There's like a movement thing that Neo did in the game is pure. It's sort of like looking at an artist, really, and really only Forest could kind of match him in some of those things. It's super fun, super crazy. So very hard for me also to be unbiased when I'm talking about the CS:GO lineup, because I spend a lot of my, well, I think of it as like a childhood basically watching Neo play. So anyway, with the Olaf Boost thing,
yeah. I mean, I will quickly just jump into this point. Like to me, what the most insane thing was the fact that that he was able to get into the CS:GO and also he became one of the oldest top 20 players in the world in 2015, I believe. Yeah, he was 28 at that time. I mean, everyone was, Neo is I mean, not everyone, but, supposed experts were like, I mean, Neo, he's not the same as he used to be. Then I believe VP switched into that style that they had Snacks as IGL, and Neo was opping for a bit. He was opping for a bit, and it actually worked out very well for him, especially in Cluj-Napoca. Even though they didn't do well in that event, they still were able to do a lot. And one of the things that I, at least when I'm looking back at CS:GO history, to me that was special about this VP lineup. Not even because I'm Polish and they are Poles. Looking from the point of me being proud about them is the fact that VP, I believe at least, was the first team that started using Inferno banana control, like very hard with Molotovs and stuff. When I was looking at all of the games, I saw NIP still playing in Katowice with 2 flashes and nades. VP were the only teams that considered buying $600 incendiary and just playing with it and just utilizing the strat. And then it was picked up by NIP, and then it was picked up by other teams, and that's what makes me proud of them. But I mean, it was just a small thing that I figured out just watching the gameplay from this years ago. But I mean, it was a very good strategy, but there is a better strategy that happened, at least in Overpass. So I mean, it was something, right?
Yeah, I think so. This is another probably one of the craziest moments in my career, I would say. So, obviously, we're watching the game, and nobody's ever seen anything even remotely like this. You know, like the only other moment I've had where I've been in a place where I thought like, what's happening right now is I think when Emilio got vac banned in the middle of a game, and we were just laughing at that, you know, because it's obviously so ridiculous. But this was a moment where, you know, we were honestly impressed, right? Like, it was an impressive thing. They had found a way to basically, you know, do this thing. And I'm somebody who loves finding these little, you know, call them bugs or whatever. Like, I think it's really fun to find ways to kind of like, you know, try to push the limits of what you can do in the game, basically. Like, can we find a smoke that is, you know, just this, you know, like one-way smoke, or a flashbang that's really hard to dodge. Like, I love all those things. Yeah. So for me, that's what I saw. I saw someone that had spent a lot of, you know, time and research into doing this thing. And I knew in my mind, this is going to get patched out in the next update for this map instantly. So, you know, in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, like they've done it, but this is obviously going to get, you know, removed really quickly. And then the other thing that I thought was, if this is somehow against tournament rules, then it's not my job as a caster to point this out, right? Like, we have admins who, if things really go wrong, should be able to stop the game and say, guys, this cannot happen, right? So I thought about this when we were casting the game. I thought, I have to assume, since no one's stopping it, it's all good. You know, they've just found a way to basically exploit the system, which, I mean, part of winning is about trying to do that, which is totally, in a way, that's what you should be doing. But also, it's a funny moment. We're laughing. Like, we're literally laughing our way through this game because it's so absurd, you know? And there's no other way. I couldn't think of another way to do it at the time, you know? It's just so hilarious and absurd, and just, you know, nobody, you know, obviously on the LDLC side is kind of getting shot at from the sky. And then it's over, and I walk off stage, and Semler and I are laughing, and I can feel, as soon as I get like away from the microphones, I can sort of feel like there's this attitude of like, there's a big problem here, or there's a really big problem. Like a really serious kind of attitude. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, damn, what's going on, guys? Right? And they're like, this is, you know, illegal, blah, blah, blah. And then I pick up my phone and I look at like my Twitter feed or something, and like, I look at my feed and I could feel like all the blood from my face just kind of like rushing down. I just had this like I've never had so many messages of people just telling me to, you know, to kill myself, and just telling me that I'm essentially like an awful human for like, because
really,
because
the blowback was on you as well as the caster of the game.
Yes, an enormous amount, because I understand why. Because what people are seeing when they're seeing the game, a lot of people are seeing, here are these guys from LDLC that we like, you know, and they are getting cheated on by Fnatic, basically. They're being cheated by this boost, and these guys are laughing. Why are they laughing at cheating? Like, why are they, you know, why aren't they saying something, right? And like, so in a way, I understand the context of it, right? Now, it didn't last for that long. Like, pretty quickly, people were like, you know, they were on to just hating the Fnatic guys, which in itself is also kind of crazy. But you know, there was a moment there where I just remember thinking like, damn, like, this is, I've never, like, I was so shocked, you know. It took me like a minute to figure out like what is the context of why this is, because I can see it, you know, maybe you're watching from home or whatever, like during Twitch chats, you know, people are getting angry, and, you know, here are the commentators just stupidly laughing along, you know. So I kind of understand it a little bit, but anyway, yeah, that was really crazy. And then obviously there was all the drama afterwards where everyone is like, you know, who are we blaming? What's going on? I cannot imagine what those like 12 hours it must have been like for Fnatic, and like for those guys, right? Obviously, essentially, you know. And again, like, what's the line? You find something, you think it's legal by the tournament rules, you think you can win. Like, is there some point where you're supposed to say, oh, actually, for more, you know, oh no, we're gonna try and not do this, you know? It's like people do this all the time, just in less egregious ways, and sometimes obviously you overstep the line. Yeah. That's why we have admins who show up and say stop, you know. But
yeah, I mean that's why I mean, I believe Devilwalk said in after game interview, he said that we had the strategy ready for 3 months, like we were hiding it for 3 months. So obviously they had to check the rules beforehand, and it said on the DreamHack 2013 that it was illegal, but on DreamHack 2014 it was legal. So it was perfectly legal to use, but the backlash from community was just so huge. And I had no idea till this day that you were as well. I mean, if you, then Semler probably as well, like you both got criticism for that. But it's weird for me, at least, because like when I listen to it, and me being or at least I was a caster for a few years, to give you the context, I get like when you get criticism for something. For example, I had a situation where I said something very wrong about a company sponsoring one of the teams. I said something along those lines that, yeah, this game is looking very bad for those guys, as bad as their TikToks are, or something like that. Like, you know, like something along those lines. I got suspended and everything. And obviously I received a lot of backlash, but it was absolutely, I should have received a lot of backlash for that. But what you did, but what you did in this situation was just, you casted the game. I think from my point of view, you absolutely behaved professionally, especially considering the fact that the first round they played with the Olaf boost, they lost as well. I mean, they lost the pistol round. When it really happened, when it really started, it was a scout round, right? When like even Semler said, I think Semler said to you, like, look, they don't even know where to look at, because they were like just running around on water, on overpass. They just had no idea what to do. And yeah, I mean, it's just weird. I mean, I get it from the French fans, if it came from the French fans or just LDLC fans, that they could have been a little bit mad at that, but still, like, don't blame the player, blame the game. And you're not even a player, you're just a caster, so don't blame the caster, blame the game. Like,
I mean, I remember thinking too that I was so sure that LDLC would find out. Like, I was so sure they would just look up and realize what was going on, and you know, even to this day, I haven't actually never done it. I don't know, it's probably hard to do now, but I always wonder, like, if you go back and watch the demos, like, it feels like, man, they must have been able to see something, right? I'm not saying that they knew and they pretended like they didn't or anything. I'm just saying that when I was casting the game, I was like, they're gonna find out in 2 or 3 rounds, and then this isn't gonna work anymore. So I think part of the problem is also that it worked so well, right? That you know, it is a little bit like, you know, if you're watching, I don't know, 2 people fight in a schoolyard, right? It's like that can happen, and if somebody punches somebody else, maybe you say, okay, guys, break it up or whatever. It's over. Yeah. But at some point, if somebody's, you know, if you're like, you know, trying to kick someone who's already down, like, there's a point in the fight where you say, okay, now I'm on the side of whoever is getting beat up. Like, just stop this, you know? Like, and I think that was the emotional equivalent of this in this particular situation, is because it worked so much. It was, at the end, it was like watching somebody who's, you know, just on the ground kind of getting beat up, and you're like, oh, damn, what is going on, right? But from my point of view, I keep thinking, well, they're going to get up any minute now, you know? It's not going to work forever. Yeah. So who cares, you know? It's
literally when you knock someone out, but they're still conscious, and you feel like, yeah, he's going to get up, right? And he's going to still be fighting. Yeah. I mean, there was also this issue that it was later discovered that they couldn't shoot him back from some angles, right? There was this bug, and it basically, like, I believe, looking back at it from now, the only strat that could have worked against this Olaf boost was if they discovered that quickly and actually A-rushed throughout the whole half. Like, this was literally the only way they could have won this game, because if you B-rush, he's gonna spot it. You can maybe try to fake the B-rush with 2 players running into the monster, but then, like you could have even seen them, like, they took the pass, everyone went out of the computers, they started talking, and probably they were like, I wish we had the voice comms of that, because they were like, yeah, what is going on, guys? I don't know where he's shooting me at. We don't know what is going on. Like, we have no clue. And yeah, I mean, it was absolutely crazy. And then the final as well, right? I mean, the disqualification. I mean, it was not a disqualification. They just forfeited the game, and then the final was LDLC versus NIP. And the final was also crazy, I think. Like, just looking back, it was just like, you know, NIP, you feel like, yeah, they're gonna win this for sure. It's gonna be the second major that they won right after Cologne, and then the heartbreak happened, and I just felt like, damn, they should have had this one. They really should have had this one. I felt bad for them, especially considering the fact that in Poland there is also there was back at the time there was a huge fan base of NIP. Like you even remember for sure because you casted Katowice 2015 when they were playing against Fnatic. Like no one cheered for Fnatic, obviously because they beat VP, right? But also because like everyone was like, yeah, get right, Forest, legends of the game, let's go, they are gonna win this one, and another heartbreak happened. Like it was just like. I mean, it was tough. It was tough to be an IP fan. That's for sure. Like every time you go into the major, finally feel like, oh yeah. Like right now, if you are a fan of, I don't know, VP, Heroic, anyone, and they get into the major final, you're like, wow, it's a success, obviously. Yeah, but back then you had like, you know, top five team being so close to each other. There was no really a top 10. Everyone could have made it there. And also, I believe at 2015 at the start, because we are going like, you know, through the time, there was an Ibuypower situation, right?
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
I mean,
because for sure I know the Bardolph reaction because it was on live stream.
Yeah.
What was your when were you when it happened? What exactly happened? Like because obviously it's like a huge news, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, in a way, on some level, like we have to like make an example out of people who try to, you know, undermine the integrity of the game because it's such a serious thing, right? Yeah. But at the same time, there's some human aspect to this where you can't help but also think these guys they weren't making any money on whatever they were doing. Like it was so low stakes, you know, and it was so stupid. Like it was just there was a part of me that sort of couldn't help but feel like, should they get punished? Yes, no question. Should they be banned for as long as they were? That's hard for me to be on board with. Like that feels like a really severe sort of punishment. But you know, at the same time, like there is like a lot of the game rests on, you know, essentially on betting, right? And I don't know if Valve did it for that reason. I doubt it, but in some level, like we have to take it seriously. The potential for fixing matches. Doesn't matter if it's a really high stakes game or, you know, some random ESCA game that nobody cares about. Maybe not, like at the end of the day, but my sense is that, you know, it's a hard thing to uncover if people do it well, right? Like it's really hard to stop people from doing it. So, you know, the fact that these guys did it badly, I mean, that's kind of what ultimately got them wrecked, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm fine with the idea that they got punishment. I feel like the punishment is probably too crazy. And I don't think, maybe this doesn't matter in some, I'm not like a legal, you know, philosopher or anything. I don't think these guys were thinking, you know, this is so clever, we're gonna get away with like a ton of shit and we're gonna become millionaires and we're like wrecking the whole thing. Just from what I know, right? Somebody like Steel, for instance, right? Like, yeah, I know he loves the game. I don't think in his mind he connected the thoughts that like what I'm doing here might end up really damaging this game, and I'm okay, and who gives a fuck? Like that's, you know, there's a part of me that maybe this doesn't matter, but there's a part of me that's one of the reasons maybe it's also harder for me to say hell yeah, lock him up forever, you know, because there's a part of me that's like, man, I know this guy would give a lot to you know, improve the game or whatever. So yeah, a complicated situation, honestly. Glad I'm not the one that has to make decisions like this, because as you can maybe tell, I probably wouldn't be the best person to hand out a lot of judgment in this kind of case.
I'm on board with you on that. I mean, considering the fact that Forsaken got 5 years banned and he was literally cheating during the LAN game, and I mean, yes, they did something wrong, but especially considering the Brack's age at that time, and the talent he was, like, it's just such a waste. Like, when you think about what he could have accomplished in CSGO, like, I mean, there is a real chance that he would be in the C9 team with Skadoodle if he wasn't banned, and that's really heartbreaking for him. Especially like looking at that, at the fact that Skadoodle finally won the major, like after all those years.
I'll say this though, this is the problem though. This on the other side of this, if you're a young player out there now, and you're in some tier 2 or 3 team, and somebody comes to you with the idea of fixing a match, something like you've got to remember what it is you're throwing away by doing this. Like that there is a real point to be made that it doesn't really matter how much money is involved or how bad the game is. It doesn't matter if you think other teams are already doing it or whatever. Like this is it's a bigger problem than we want to accept, I think, in the scene right now. And it's really not a good thing, you know. And on some level, it should be a reminder to those players that if you think you have a chance of making a real career out of it, you could be throwing all of it away by doing this. So just don't do it. I mean, I know it's easy to say, and people obviously when they do this is the problem with committing crimes is that when you're committing crimes, you don't obviously think you're going to get caught. Like that's the baseline thinking is, of course, I'm not going to get caught doing this. So why would I care about the consequences? But yeah, I wish you could get more people to consider it. So on the other side of it, yeah, it was a harsh punishment, but hopefully, maybe it also dissuaded some people in the future of saying like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not going down this route. So I don't know. Tough situation.
I feel like Ibuypower is just a great example of that. Like, I would say to every young player that if you ever consider match fixing, just look at what happened to Ibuypower. Basically. It's very unfortunate, but it is a great example of what can happen to you. Especially, everyone is talking about Brax, obviously because of the age and the talent, but still, also, especially as someone who watched a lot of Steel videos myself, this guy had just such a huge knowledge about the game, and even the analysis that he did on Ibuypower versus LDLC, it just showed that he understood everything just so perfectly, and he hadn't had any chance to show it later, because he had some in Ghost, because obviously he was playing in Ghost Gaming, I believe, but it's not the same when you're playing tier 3 or tier 1, right? It's just different. Also, changing the topic a little bit, because we stopped in 2015. You still casted a lot with Semler in 2015, and I wanted to get to know why do you think it's to me, at least, from my point of view, I listened to you with Henry G, lately, with Semler, with Moses, with a lot of the guys. And for some reason, I don't know why. I don't know what it is. But it's always Anders and Semler that just remains on top. Always. No matter what I listen to, what type of game, I just put some old broadcast, let's say from 2014, 17, 18. I listen to it, I'm like, damn, it was such a good cast, for example. Why do you think it was? Because, yeah, obviously, you were more of a play-by-play caster, and he was more of a color caster, but it wasn't always like that, especially if you look at the Happy highlight, right, from Inferno, because you were casting this game as well, right, with him? And he was the one who actually did the play-by-play there. So
yeah, I think we tried to mix it up a lot. I wouldn't necessarily say that I think Semler was doing too much color stuff. I think we tried to keep it more of an open conversation, where it's just we're just kind of going back and forth and mixing it up a little bit, and that was kind of intentional too. We kind of thought, do we have to have these really hard roles where we really, try to break things down like this? And yeah, that was sort of the feeling. But I think I think it's going to be true for everybody. When you are on your way up in your career, everything is just fun and exciting, and it's just it's all just fun and games and cool, and there's no real competition, there's no real threat, there's no real you're getting hired to a ton of events, and things just are more easy, more fun, and it's kind of it's just a wild ride. And as a result, it's a lot easier being totally carefree, and you rock up to every event with maximum confidence, with just everything is 10 out of 10 across the board, basically. And that obviously does something when you're on camera. And then, at some point, there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more politics involved in just between different organizers, and there's a ton of different things that suddenly come into it, and it becomes in a way sort of much more serious, and it's a really hard skill to learn how to sort of work through all those things, and also how to say, okay, hey, listen, yeah, you know, we're number one, but now, damn, Sadekist and Henry are coming into it, and they're fucking good too. And actually, now the community say, oh, they might actually be better than Anders and Semler. What the fuck is this, you know? And like you go through like all these different stages of trying to sort of figure that out, and it's much harder than, like, it's much, put it another way, it's much easier to be a really good caster when you're sort of only on one side of this curve. And in a way, if you wanted to have like the ultimate experience, you just quit, like you just go up the line and then you just quit and you say, I'm out, you know? Yeah. Because the truth is, on the other side of that, for everybody, is going to be waiting a different environment. Now, I think you can work through that environment, but it takes a lot of effort and work. It very likely won't just be like a really fun ride. It'll be a lot of like, oh, I need to have different expectations for myself. I need to put in a lot more work. I need to prove myself, even though I feel like I already did that. You know, you have to do it again, and or you know, you have to keep doing it. And that's just, you know, that's just kind of the nature of it. But that's I think that's one of the big reasons why you're having fun in a very, very different way. You know, and it's easy for that. It's really easy for that dynamic to be put off, you know, just a little bit, and then now you're like, ooh, I'm having fun, but I'm also thinking about other things, you know. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking about, well, what if I don't do a good enough job here, you know? Could that mean something for the future? like there's all this stuff that creeps in. So I think that's a big part of the reason why.
For sure. But also I feel like, from my point of view, you were, as a duo, kind of underrated. For me, at least. Not that you didn't get the respect that you obviously deserved. I felt like, to me, as a guy who is just listening to the casts, like right now even, I look at, for example, Scrowny and Landers, and they are just like so fucking good. Yes. Like, especially Scrowny, like the way he just figures out some of the caster calls he makes are just like, when I listen to it, I'm just, you know, I sit and I'm like, wow, he actually probably made that up like 5 seconds ago in his mind, and he just spoke it out loud. But also, I felt like you were underrated with Semler, because to me, if you are the best duo of casters out there, you should be casting every final of every game. And I remember there were some situations where you were casting semi-finals of some games, but you weren't casting the finals. And that pissed me off as a fan. Not only as a fan of yours, but also as a fan of CS. Because me being a fan of CS, I expect to get the best cast. And I'm not saying that, for example, DDK and Bardolph casting some major finals wouldn't be at the same level of you, because maybe they would. What I'm saying is, I think that at a certain point of time, you deserved it more, for example, from my point of view. And if I feel it, I can almost certainly confirm it that you felt it as well.
Yeah, I mean, my take on this is something that really early on in my career, I ran into, for people who remember, Sir Scoots, who, you know, has been around broadcasting for a very, very long time, like, you know, since before most of us were alive, probably. And he said something to me very early on, I think, like, probably DreamHack 2013, I imagine. He said, basically, it's a concept, he said, like, show is king, which just means whatever it takes to make the best show, that's what we do, no matter what. And I thought, that is really cool. I love this idea. Like, let's do that. Let's always just make the best show, whatever. So even if that means that somebody's going to get personally offended by, you know, oh, I'm not doing this, or whatever it is, like, just don't care about that. Just, you know, it's not about that. It's about the show. So not about you. It's about the show. I think that's a really strong idea. And so what I think, if I don't get hired to an event, or if I don't get to do the final that I want to do, or whatever, I think to myself, somebody whose job it is to make these calls basically decided this is the show that we want, right? Like, this is what we think is going to be best. And so I don't have to think about it anymore. Like, I just can say, okay, you know what, that's good. Like, you made this call. Now, obviously you want to try and do all the finals, and because it's great fun and it's cool and it's just, you know, it is really fun to do. So no question, obviously, in my own mind, I'm thinking, damn, like, I need to do this, right? But for me, it's a really big weight off my mind to say, I don't have to think about it. Like I can just kind of like outsource it to this idea that the people who produce this show, who after all do know what they're doing, you know, they've made another call, and that's all that, and they did it to try and make the show that they think is going to be the best possible, and that's all I have to really know. So for me, that's been a big thing for me. There's also another thing which is kind of, I've tried to warn a lot of people about this in the industry, but nobody seems to care about it. But the truth is, if you make your best casters or the most popular casters or whatever, if you make them do every final of every event, you will also burn them out in the eyes of the community. Like you eventually, you know, people notice things they say. They notice like ways that they, you know, try to, you know, talk about around. You end up using the same words a little bit too much, maybe. And at some point, people are going to start to say, man, I've already kind of heard a lot of this before. Can I get something new? And then when they don't, that mood turns from being, can I get something new, to I'm sick of these guys. And then it turns to, it's bullshit that they're doing like, you know, it like the community feeling can change a lot. And that's something that I think people underestimate. And as you know, Semler and I felt that at one point, even worse, I remember, is we were doing a lot of the finals, but a lot of the finals were really bad. So we ended up doing, like, obviously we all remember the big finals. So there were a lot of finals that Semler and I were doing that were just, it's like a 4 out of 10 game. But the semifinals might have been really sick. So then you also get this feeling that, like, one, the community kind of want, you know, they want Sadekist and Henry. They want Dan and James to do the final. And I want it too, because, you know, because for me, I'm like, let's take some of the pressure off on, you know, on the community getting burned out on Semler and Anders, right? Let's let the other guys do it. They work hard. They're really good. It's not going to be a problem. So let them do it. And then Semler and I can just enjoy doing a semifinal, and maybe the semifinal might even be better, which was, you know, a case for a lot of it. So I don't know. Yeah. It's very, very hard. It's a very, very complicated problem, I would say. I've talked to Scrawny and Launders. I've talked to Chad and Alex about it and said, hey, guys, just know that this can happen, because it totally blindsided Semler and I. And I don't really want it to blindside other people, because it's not necessarily the most fun thing to deal with, you know, when suddenly, like, people sort of go from saying, yeah, we love these guys, to being like, ooh, like, we're sick of them, you know? Like,
yeah, I can totally agree with what you're saying, especially that I wasn't looking at this from this point of view, but yeah, I agree, especially because when I was casting League of Legends, I had this situation that I believe in 1 month I had 13 casts, which was a lot, and in 1 week I had 5 of them. I was 5 days in a row. And there was even one guy that said, holy fuck, why is he there again? He said it, and he even texted me privately, because I asked him, are we good and everything? And he said, it's not that I hate you. Do you don't have anyone else that can maybe do the show or something? Because I'm hearing your cast every single time. I'm okay with your cast. It's not that I like it or I dislike it, but when I hear you 5 days in a row, it's just tiring. I don't want to stay there. Like I get this point of view, and it can definitely go this way that you described. So yeah, I agree. Also, I want to ask you and maybe pick your brains a little bit about 2015, 2016. More of 2016, because it was obviously a bit of a change in the era, I would say. There was still VP that was very strong. Luminosity was in the picture, obviously. Fnatic, that was really strong. And what do you think overall of 2015, 2016? What, when you think of these years, comes into your mind as maybe the best memory that you have?
I mean, I think probably the crowd in Cologne in 2015 was super insane. It was like one of the best, I think, stage caster setups I think we've ever had, basically. And I guess also MLG, like the Columbus event, I think was in 16, right? Was it, or 15? I can't remember now.
16.
Yeah, 16. Yeah. So, and that was another insane event in terms of, like, we were like basically in front of the stage, like looking at the crowd, so we're like really close to people, which is like a very nice dynamic to have. It's something that's really overlooked in a lot of stage setups, is that very often as a caster you are sort of put away from the audience. You're in a box somewhere else, and it's so cool to be near people, because you can interact with people in a different way, you know. So those two events were super big for that kind of thing. And then I guess towards the end of 16, is that when E-League started making its appearance?
Yeah, it was. No. It was towards the end of 15. At the start of 16, they had E-League season 1 was in June of 16. Because I remember exactly because I was on my vacation in Malta back then, and VP and Fnatic were playing in the final. That was the event that they played, and you casted it as well with some.
Yeah. And that is obviously that was a really like what a crazy situation that, you know, American television like Turner Sports, which, if you don't know, Turner Sports like broadcasts, you know, the NBA and stuff like that. Like, it's a massive company with like an unreal history, and it's, you know, it's a really it's a really wild place. So having those, sort of having the conversation with American TV, now you're talking to like executives that have won, you know, awards for sports broadcasting and are, you know, like really high up in the American broadcasting system, and so being involved with that, I think it's obviously, that's kind of like it might even end up being sort of almost like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Obviously the weird thing is, at that point in time, I didn't think of it that way. I thought, yeah, this is totally where everything is headed. Like, we're gonna go from like, you know, DreamHack to blah, 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 up to like American net, and then we're just it's gonna keep on going, you know. You like, maybe that's stupid, but like, you know, in my mind, I didn't think, oh, E-League is going to last for essentially like a season and a half and then it's over, you know? I thought, no, this is going to be sick, you know? So, but yeah, I mean, like, those are crazy moments. And obviously I'm very proud of like all the work we did in terms of like, you know, kind of like trying to lift Counter-Strike up as high as we possibly could, you know, to like, you know, get it to as many people, to, you know, get fans involved in it. That's like, I think that's, you know, there's still something that I think about. I'm like, damn, like it's crazy. And I get a lot of people message me, right, and say, you basically, this is like the era that people look back on, I think, for a lot of the time, 15, 16, and say that's where, like, we sort of fell in love with Counter-Strike, and we've been attached ever since. I'm like, that's great. That's what we wanted, you know.
And it definitely worked out. I think that for me personally, I mean, I remember you and Semler just having such a good moments there as a casters, and the games also helped a lot, because there was also a situation that actually Dana White, the UFC president, came into the E-League. He even made a picture with Pasha, and that was the reason why I even got into the MMA, because you and Semler brought it up on the broadcast, during the broadcast. And I was like, yeah, who is Dana White? Let's check it out. Okay, so this is UFC. And then I got into MMA and stuff. So yeah, it was, you see how one thing can actually lead to like crazy backstory. The same with Vugo thing. I actually hate you for that. I don't know if you remember, there was a situation where Olaf Meister got DDoSed, and the Fnatic coach Vugo had to play for him, and you decided with Semler to make fun of him for the most of the game. And I was like, holy shit, that's so fucking cool. And then 5 years later, I became a caster, and I'm like, yeah, I remember when Anders did that, and there was a similar situation in the Polish League of Legends League, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna make fun of this guy as well. It was my second day on the job. Yeah. I did that. People loved it. People were like, yeah, this guy is so cool. I got the email 15 minutes after the broadcast ended. Well, Kasper, this is unacceptable. You're getting fired. And I got fired right afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, nice. You know, it's an inspiration. I look it up, Anders Vugo. You don't know what it is, guys. Come on. And then you did the second game, where you praised him for everything he did. Yeah. On the Dust 2. Yeah, and he actually played pretty decently. Like, he literally got the huge double kill there. And I'm like, yeah, this is such a cool concept. People should do it more often. And then I got fired, and I'm like, yeah, I guess this is why they are not doing this too often.
Nobody's doing it, That's so funny. That's great. Yeah, I got you fired 5 years later. That's sick.
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, I agree with 2015 and 2016 being years of memory, for sure. And there was even a Thorin and Shaquille O'Neal argument, right, on the desk. I think it was during the E-League. Yeah, it was also very, very famous. And I mean, I feel like 2017, moving forward, was a bit a bit different. We still had a lot of majors, obviously.
Yeah.
The Atlanta was the start, and I want to specifically ask you about Atlanta because obviously you're Danish.
Yep.
And I always wondered, when you casted Astralis, was there a part of you that you were like, I mean, yeah, you know, when I'm from Poland, maybe it's a matter of country, I don't know. When I'm listening to when I'm watching Polish games, I want them to win always.
Yeah, of course.
So when you had Virtus.Pro versus Astralis in the final, I think that you had great casts, very professional. But was there like 1% of you inside of you were like, come on, Astralis, like you should be winning this round, because it was like the rounds were so crazy in this game specifically. The rounds Zipex 1v2 with 1 HP that he did on overpass. The clutches were there. Like, what were you thinking during this game?
I think so. I had a lot of practice in the beginning because of the Nip Gaming TV connection. That I had to cast a lot of NIP games without, you know, people tuning in and saying, oh wow, this guy is so biased, you know, in favor of NIP, it's kind of boring, you know. So I already had a lot of practice to make sure that I was trying to be very neutral and basically saying, like, you know, if they screw something up, I'm going to talk about it. If they do something good, we're going to talk about it. But, you know, it's not going to be the NIP party, basically. So I think I already had a lot of practice in that. I think for when you're watching like a Danish team play, I try to sort of adopt a similar mindset where I'm basically thinking to myself, there are so many fans from all over the world watching this. It's if I am going to be like very biased about something, I'm at least gonna have some respect and say that out loud and say, okay, like, you know, obviously I'm gonna be, you know, I really love these guys and they have to win, you know. I think if you, because it's actually, I think it's not a problem if you're biased. You just have to make it clear, you know. Then it's fine. Then you can, you know, you can root for a team all you want, you know. We've had lots of commentators do this in the past too, right? Where like a lot of the NA guys will do it, you know, when it's like, you know, you're watching Team Liquid and they love it, and I think that's not a problem. But it would be a problem if they did it, but you know, they just never said it. They said, oh no, I just happen to think that Team Liquid is the best team ever, but you know, that's just my objective. Like if you're sort of hiding that fact, I think it becomes a big problem. So I try to be as open as I can by saying, you know, if I really care about a team or whatever. Usually it's not so much for me about, funnily enough, it's not so much about the team or like the organization or maybe even the country side of it, but obviously the difference for me in those games will be, I know people like Dupree and Device a little bit differently, you know? Like, I have, like, a different connection with some of these people, and I know how much work they've had to put in to become the team that could win that major. So I think that's probably where most of my bias would have come from in those moments. And that is, you know, there's definitely but as you guys probably know as well, if you're watching, you know, classic VP play, it's like your feelings can be all over the place, because when they're winning, you're like, yes. And then when they start losing, you can almost be this other side where you feel like, come on, you know, like, just why, like, you almost have like the opposite sort of, you know, feel. So it's hard, I think, if you get too much into that as a commentator. It can be, you can end up on both sides, where either you are praising someone way too much, or you're being way too critical because you're actually upset that they're not winning, you know, when they should be.
Yeah, I feel like it's not. I'm not giving you any criticism or Semler, but I feel like this is when Semler jinxed it a little bit. I remember watching it because I was in a hospital, and I'm laying in the hospital bed. VP is winning 7-0 on the final map of Train, and Semler said it, and they won the first map. It was 7-1, and Semler said, Well, at least now VP know that they are playing against somebody. There is someone on the server. They are online. And I'm like, oh, shit, he jinxed it. And actually, he did, because they lost 16-14. And I was so mad at him for that. But yeah, I mean, that can definitely happen. That you are praising someone too much. But I mean, for sure, it has to be one of your favorite finals, right?
Yeah. No, I like 100%. It's so crazy, like, the way that they kind of like turned the tide, like they rushed the AR with Tech-9s and everything, and somehow that worked, and then just kind of kept on going. No, it was super crazy. And The crowd was insane. Like, I don't know if people remember, but like they had these chants that were going. It was like half the crowd was saying like, "Let's go Astralis," and the other half would answer, "Let's go VP," and it would like go back and forth. And it was an absolutely crazy situation, you know, like from every perspective. But yeah, obviously, I you know, even in the moment, right, I was super proud of the guys for putting all of this together, because people forget. Before this team was Astralis, when they were TSM, they were famously known as the chokers. They were known to be the team that would choke like every big game, and then that was it. And they like the work that they had to put in to overcome that was really significant. And you know, for me, that was that's obviously that was super crazy. And like you know, I think one of my favorite games to have cast probably. So yeah, super fun experience.
Also, the amount of highlights that happened, right? I mentioned that, but when I think about it, the nuke eco round from VP was crazy. That they won with full USPs, just snacks rushing outside. It was just crazy, just jumping onto the silo, winning the round. Then you have Overpass. The Kierby clutch 1v1 with snacks was crazy. Zipex clutch, and then you mentioned the Tech9 rush. Pasha said it later that the reason, like, because he asked the Glaive, like, why did you fully just kept on rushing A? And he said, yeah, because it was so loud in the area that we bet that you couldn't hear shit, so we just kept rushing A. And we knew that you wouldn't hear us. And it actually worked. Like, it was so simple, but it just worked, and there was nothing they could have done. I mean, yeah, definitely one of the better finals that happened. And then, to me at least, the storyline that built up there was crazy, because then right afterwards there was DreamHack Masters Las Vegas. VP beat Astralis, I think 16-2, 16-3 on the maps. Like, they stomped them, absolutely destroyed them. Then there was Taz tweeting to Kierby after the major that, yeah, the next event we are going to destroy you. And they actually did, and they won this event. And then they played, you also casted it, the Clash for Cash, I think it was an event, right?
The E-League one, yeah.
Yeah, but
crazy.
It was not close.
No, unfortunately. I remember that was sad, yeah. Because it looked like that was such a good idea, but unfortunately it was way one-sided.
Yeah, it was. But there was a major in Krakow that people were waiting for me to ask you. There was like, I think I got like 25 to 30 questions only about Krakow.
Yeah, let's go.
Specifically also about, not only about North Game, but like that, how to put it? Like the arena was built, I would say, in a very different way than it usually would be for an esports event, because you would be in the middle of everything, right, as the caster.
Yeah.
So what was the feeling during the North game? I mean, I will put a North game as the example, because I like, even when you put the loudest crowd reactions, there's always this North game up there with Bialy highlight of Nuke. So what were the feelings like? What thoughts were crossing through your minds? Because it must have been amazing is not even putting this word into like the perspective, like spectacular, everything. Like, it would be like an amazing experience overall.
Yeah. So one, the podium that we were on, it was right. You're right. It was in the center of like everything. So we had people like all the way around us basically, but you also had to go up some really big steps. Like it really gave this like big feeling. You're like going up and up and up. You're really like, you're elevated up, so you're like at the level of the crowd, which, you know, was like a little bit higher up. So that in itself was just like, you felt like I'm walking up on the big stage now. This is gonna be crazy. And then, you know, before this we've had big events, like the MLG event had a pretty big crowd. Obviously in Cologne and Katowice we've had big crowds. And big crowds are fun in general because there's like a lot of energy, like a lot of excitement going on there, and that's really cool. But the Krakow event was the first event I've ever been to where you had like real like fan coordination for songs and for claps and for all these different things, right? Like I've never met an audience like that was sort of prepared to really have like a sports event, you know, and treated like that too. You know, like the most we get normally are people saying, you know, let's go Astralis. I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, you can go, let's go any team, like, who cares? In a way, like, it's fine, it's better than saying nothing, but they're like, the level of coordination was so crazy. And that was completely insane. Like, I've to this day I've never tried anything like that in the same way. And it was really, really wild. And like, yeah, it's the sort of thing like Like, it's hard to explain, like, when you go to bed at night in your hotel room, and you, like, it's, I guess, same if you've been to a concert or something. Like, you close your eyes and you can sort of, you know, you can still feel, like, the same feeling. You're like, damn, like, how do I get to sleep now, you know? Because you can, like, so it was an absolutely insane, you know, like, that setup was really, really cool. And like I said, I think the crowd was probably close to unmatched for anything that I've tried. Just in terms of, like, it's hard to explain, but, like, it's so different when a crowd shows up and are ready to be part of the show in some way. Like, they are ready to say, like, we're really here. And that's something that, like, esports has to do a better job in general of learning. I actually remember, I thought after being in Krakow, I thought, man, I wonder if we could help all the organizations, like, write their own songs. Because this, you know, in football, obviously, people have, like, you know, like, all these different, you know, famously, I guess, especially in, like, English, I don't watch a lot of football, but I've seen plenty of videos of, like, you know, different clubs who just have all these different songs that everybody knows. I'm like, maybe we could help, you know, why couldn't we have, like, a, you know, a fan group that has, like, a certain chant that they know and all the rest of it. Because, and again, like, in Krakow, I had this feeling that, okay, there are people here who would know how to do this, you know, like, we could build it up, or we could learn from this and take it into other esports arenas, because it does completely change what the show is and how it feels and, like, how much fun it is. So yes, a super unique experience.
I mean, I agree, and I feel like you probably to this day don't know how much credit you should get, you personally with Samler as well, that forecasting the games that you did, not because of the level of casts, just because you did this at the level that you did this. Because, like, I remember myself, there's a quick story about that. I wasn't in Krakow back then. I was unfortunately in close to London, because I was working as a waiter, because it was during the summer, obviously. And I remember finishing my shift. It was morning. The VP game was very, like, I think it was 10 or 12, something like that. And I ran back into my, like, locker room to just quickly dress up. I put on the game. First shock that I had was that the VP, like, the guys from VP didn't have the normal shirts on. They had the white and red shirts because of obviously the Polish colors that they had. And I was like, holy shit, this game is gonna be massive. And then I put the volume up, and then I hear you and Samner, and I was like, damn, I need to go real fast to get back home. I literally drove 25 kilometers to my house on bike. I think I did this. I think I did this super fast, like, literally, triathlon fast, insanely fast. I was just, like, running. I went back home. I didn't spoiler myself anything. I just put on Twitch. I went back in time. I put past broadcast, and I started the game from the beginning. And I just listened to it, and I was like, I didn't even care about the result. I was like, yeah, VP probably are gonna, because before the Krakow, they were, like, in this huge slump. They lost Clash of Clans. They were losing everything, and I didn't even have huge expectations for that. I was like, yeah, it's in Krakow, it's great, it's Snack's home city, obviously. And yeah, I mean, and also, like, you said about the caster calls that you are just they're just waiting for you, some of them for a few years. We also have some of the games where they just happened automatically, and I feel like this was one of the games where Snacks knifed config, and you said the Dragon of Krakow is here, and the fact that this is his literally like, this is his city that he lived in for the, like, most of his life, is just absolutely insane. And yeah, I mean, I just had an insane fun watching it, obviously, for most of the times, but I also feel like there was something very bad about Krakow, and I mean, specifically Krakow Major, was the fact that quarterfinals and semifinals were at the same day. I feel like it shouldn't have happened, because then I even remember, it may be a small thing, but I even remember Neo writing the post a few years after, and he said that it happened in New York and it happened in Krakow, that they just couldn't keep up, because they played versus, in New York, I think you casted this as well, versus SK Gaming, ESL New York 2016, I think so, at least. Moses, you and Selmer, I'm not sure, something like that, yeah. And yeah, they played versus SK Gaming. They played quadruple overtime on Overpass, and they played Mirage overtime, and then they won on Nuke 16-7. They won at 3 in the morning in Poland, and then they started the game at midnight in it was very late in New York as well. And even Neo said this with us, that yeah, they were just super tired at the end. Like most of the older guys, as he said, he quote to quote, he said, older guys, we just couldn't keep up. And then in the semifinal of the game versus Immortals, even Neo said that yeah, I mean, he was just like, he was also heartbroken because it was literally like 2 hours before this game, his cat died, and he got the news from his mom or someone from the family. And you know, I'm not blaming the tournament because they did it as they did it, but you know, maybe if they had the 1 day break, it would have been different in certain situations. But it's the same rules for everybody. Like, you know, some of the guys also had to play. Even Immortals versus Big, I think you casted it as well, or someone did. This was this game where the fans had to get out of the area. Of the arena because it was after midnight in Poland as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of logistical problems with that Krakow event. That was like is super hard, and I mean, this is, you know, I think PTL got a lot of like pushback for it in general, right? And it is unfortunate, but it's also, you have to think about what a big machine it is to put together an event. Like, it's so crazy. And when you're in an arena you've never been in before, there are so many things you don't know, like about how the building even works, you know? And like I mean, obviously this is the job of an event organizer, but at the same time, like, it's easy to say, oh, what, like, they should have known X, Y, Z. It's like, yeah, like, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here. So I actually always felt pretty bad about the whole thing from PTL's point of view. Like, I feel like in many ways it was a really sick event. It was just also, unfortunately, like, you know, it was also like there was a lot of issues that kind of came into it that kind of, you know, overtook a lot of the headlines. And fair play, I guess that happens. But for me, it's always been like a super unique event in my brain because of, you know, just because of like the atmosphere and everything that was going into it. It was sick. Yeah. And the whole, you know, like I remember I was so happy when I realized that Krakow had a, you know, like the dragon sort of city emblem and like the whole thing. I was like, this is sick, you know, like, let's go.
I mean, also, to be fair, I think Krakow is one of the most known cities in Poland. Even I was in LA 2 months ago, and I even asked the Uber driver from LA, are there any towns you know in Poland? And he said, yeah. I said, do you know Warsaw? And he said, no. And do you know Krakow? Yeah, Krakow, obviously Krakow, yeah. I'm like, dude, like, Warsaw is the biggest city. And he's like, nah, I know Krakow. And, you know, everyone is like, yeah, Krakow obviously is the city.
Yeah, but I guess also just for you know, for anyone, if anyone is listening who hasn't been to Krakow, like, it's worth going anyway just for the city alone. Like the you know, it's like a super, like I took my family there for that event. So we stayed in, like, you know, close to the center of the city or whatever. It was a really beautiful city. So worth going.
It is very specific. It's a bit different than the rest of the Poland, because obviously people are like, I don't know if it was the case for you because you came into the Katowice in 2015. Obviously, Kato is not really that fun.
It's more of an industrial city for sure. Like,
yeah, that's like tell. When people see Katowice, they're like, oh, this is typical Poland, right? And then they see Krakow and they're like, oh wow, it could be a bit different, right? And that's what it is.
Yeah, I you know, it's just a thing for me. Like, you know, Denmark is a completely flat country, right? Like, it's just flat. I always forget that, like, there are mountains and stuff in Poland. Like, you know, like that it's, you know, the country as a whole is so much more than the Katowice, you know, experience, which a lot of people in esports have, you know. So I forget about it too. But yeah, Krakow is a beautiful place to go. So
yeah. And in 2017 also there was this one tournament. I think you lost a voice in this tournament, and it's connected to VP as well, at least in the final.
Yeah.
The final with SK, it was probably, I bet, one of the longest finals that you ever casted in your life, right? Must have been.
Wait, which event was this in?
Epicenter in Russia, I think.
Oh yeah.
Epicenter 2017.
Yeah.
They played. Yeah, they played 5 maps, and there was 2 overtimes on train, 4 overtimes on cobblestone, and 1 overtime on Mirage, I think. There was, yeah. Wait, I will check it out because I have it right in front of me. I will just check it out and I will let you know. It was 3-2 to SK, and it was 16-10 to VP, 16-6 to SK, 19-16 to SK, 16-12 on cash, and then 22-18 to SK, even though VP had a map point and 4v2 on this map point, and Pasha missed a blatant shot on, like, to this day, I feel like there's this one comment on YouTube, someone wrote, Pasha missing a $250,000 shot, and I'm like, yeah, this is fucking true. This is totally true. I mean, unfortunately it is, but it is, to me, to my experience, one of the best of 5 that was ever played, and you casted it as well, with Moses this time, not with Semler. We'll get to that. And what was the overall experience of casting this game for you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it's brutal when you have best of 5s because you really don't know. Like, in theory, it could be over in like 3 maps, and then you're gonna look back and you're gonna say, I wish I gave 100% across all 3 maps, you know. But but the truth is, if it's all 5 maps and overtime, and especially when we're playing MR15, you have to think about like how can I use my voice? How can I make this work so that I don't end up going, because if it goes to a 5th map, you never want to go there, and then you're like, oh, I can't do it anymore, you know. So like it's almost like an interesting like strategy problem when you're a caster. Is like, how can I make this work? But obviously it's super fun, and you like the length of the game becomes part of the story at the end of it, right? You have to start to comment on the fact that, man, this is crazy. Like, we've been casting Counter-Strike for 6 or 7 hours in a row or whatever it is. Like it goes on. So yeah, super fun, and also a really big technical challenge, I think, in terms of how do you keep yourself going for a longer period of time, you know. Now we're back to doing best of 5 finals, but at least it's MR12, so it's a little bit more doable. I think makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. I mean, the games are just shorter, so it's obviously a bit different. And also, because I said that you casted this specific game with Moses, how did it impact you that actually Semler decided to go into the Overwatch? Obviously, it was his decision, right? So I'm not judging the decision, but it must have been a bit tough.
I would say probably what happened is more something like at one point the community became like very, very, very critical of Semler in general, right? Like, a lot of people were saying like, oh, we're sick of Semler doing this and saying this, and like, it was a lot of sort of community battle like that, and I think that just kind of became a lot, and it also became a lot for me, to be honest, and it just like, there was just a lot going on in terms of that. So I think, at least I know at one point I felt like, okay, we need to find a way to like take a break from some of the stuff, right? Because there's like, again, like I said, if you go to every event, you do every final, you do everything, and then the community starts to say, hey, we don't, we need a break from you, or whatever it is, or we don't like when you're saying this or doing this or whatever. At some point, probably the best thing to do is actually to really legitimately take a break and say, okay, I'm gonna take 3 months to think about what's going on, and then let's, I'll come back, and maybe you guys miss me in 3 months or whatever. I think that can be like a legitimate kind of thing. So yeah, I think that was at least my feeling at the time, was it's probably really good if we find a way to take a little bit of a cool down on this, right? And I think Semler, I think his feeling was, okay, if I'm going to take a break or anything, like I kind of want to be away from Counter-Strike, so I think it was more probably the case that, it's like, is it probably, better for him to go and work on something else. And then Jason and I, we'd already done some casting together, and obviously just know each other a lot. So that just kind of, that seemed to make a lot of sense to try and move things forward in that direction. But obviously, like, it's very hard. Like, Semler and I work together a lot. So like, now working with somebody else and changing the dynamic. And I would also say, like, with Semler and I, there was a lot more, like, we're just talking and having fun back and forth. I think with Jason and I, it was a lot more like, Jason is doing a lot of color commentary. He's doing a lot of like that, and that means I'm doing a lot more of like lifting the energy really high. So in a best of 5 final, that's going to be different, super different, for sure. But
do you still stay in touch with Semler, or?
Yeah. I mean, now this month, it's probably been about a month since I've visited, but that's just because of like, I've been very busy, and he's probably busy too. But yeah, I try to reach out to him like a couple of times a month, just to kind of talk and see what's going on, and with everything else, So yeah, for sure.
I think what you should have done is, honestly, I can bet you it's gonna work. It's gonna work out. If you had because obviously co-streaming right now is big. If you had the opportunity to co-stream a big event and you would do it with Semler as a duo cast, I mean, I would be watching it 24/7, mate. Honestly, I would be like, yeah, I'm waking up. For example, I don't know, I would get a call. I don't know, my girlfriend or whatever, someone would be, yeah, let's go take a dinner. I'm like, nah, I'm busy now. Like, it's time for a real work right now. Let's listen. I mean, honestly, because it is like that, I think, for a lot of people. For a lot of people. And obviously, it was a bit different when you cast it with Moses than with Semler. I felt it as well. But it was still like, a lot of "are you kidding me" moments. They were there, I would say. Yeah, so...
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've worked with so many different people in my career. Like, even when Semler and I were, like, on top, like, I still did a lot of casting with people like, Pansy, or with Machine, or with, like, I've casted with a lot of different people over the years. I've done a lot of broadcasts in the past with DDK, back when Face It were in like a little studio in Milan, like early on, like, Dan and I would do a lot of casting. Like, I've done so many different things. It's one of the things I think I'm really good at, is working with a bunch of different people. It's also one of the things that can have like a bit of a negative downside, which is that you don't have the same strong identity. Like, that, I think, is the other thing, is like the Anders and Semler identity was so strong. And when you work with a lot of different people, you end up in a different kind of situation. I kind of hate that, because I think working with different people is fun and interesting and good, and you learn new things. Like, for me, I'd love to know what like Machine and Launders sounds like, or Scrawny and Chad, or like, it would be interesting to know. But on some level, it's also a bit dangerous to try and do that, because, who knows what happens, right? Like, like maybe the community say, oh, we love this other thing way more, and now you have to fight against something that was just a fun experiment that you just did it for fun, right? But now people are having really strong opinions about it. And, like, there's just like there's a built-in kind of danger to it. But it means a lot to me, because I've tried really hard to get more people into the space. Like, it's been a big part of my life, has been to try to open the door for anybody, including people that ended up ultimately beating us, like Sadekist and Henry, which sucks for us, but it was really good for the game. And that's something that's always meant a lot to me. So in a way, I'm, it probably tactically is not the smartest thing to do, but I don't know. For me, I have this faith in Counter-Strike really long term. Like, I think we're all going to be playing Counter-Strike 50 years from now. So there's a part of me that's thinking about this on a longer runway, to say we need, like, we need as many good people as we can get, basically, is my point. So
I have the same, I would say, mental about it, so I agree with that. But I also want to ask you specifically about some of the controversy that happened. They are not around you, so it's not specifically about you personally. It's just you said a lot of things about, for example, Sadok is being there, Henry. I mean, there are some people that are esports personalities that could be quite, let's say, controversial, like I said. I want to ask you, it's not a trick question, even though it might, like, I could have put it this way, but it's not a trick question. What do you think about Thorin specifically? Because me personally, I think he does have a lot of great takes sometimes, but he does have some really weird bad takes that I just do not understand why. Like, for example, there are a lot of good takes that I feel like, actually, that makes sense. Yeah, I totally agree. But then there was this Fallen take, for example, with him being the worst. He didn't say the worst IGL. He said the worst player. Sorry, the most overrated player. I mean, if he said the most overrated IGL, I might have given it a shot to even listen. But when I heard the most overrated player, I'm like, Dude, that's a bit too far. And I know that you spent a lot of time with him because I think you even spent 2016 US election, right, together.
Yeah. We did. Yeah, like I mean, I've known Duncan for a long time now, right?
Yes. So what is your thought process when you're, I don't know, bumping into the Twitter and you see Fallen is the most overrated player of all? I'm not asking you to say bad things about that. I'm just curious about just your point to it.
It's an interesting conversation, right? It's interesting for me because I really love Fallen, right? Like he's another one of these people for me, like for Historia Neo or something like that. But the thing is, I think I know Duncan is somebody who does put a lot of thought into the things that he says. So whenever he says something that, catches the news and people kind of go crazy, I always think, did people really read what he said, or are they just kind of like, so like, I don't remember the exact tweet, but I think, I feel like he did limit the scope of, of sort of, but even if he didn't, for me, I have a couple of friends like Duncan who I put in a category of one of the reasons why I think they are fun and interesting and worth sort of having around and worth having in the general community or whatever is kind of because we can rely upon them to kind of say whatever they feel in that moment. It doesn't mean they're right, like, but it just means that those people are always going to be in the minority because the punishment for saying what's on your mind and how you feel is really severe, right? Especially in a world with like social media and stuff, right? So I think it's nice to have that input and also to have the villains sometimes. I mean, for me, like somebody like Kassad, for instance, right? Like Kassad says a lot of stuff as well, where I'm like, damn, like that's crazy. But I
recently as well.
Recently, yes, but I have this thing, right? Because if you have more than one of these friends, you're also something that you're gonna notice is that sometimes these friends end up fighting each other, and you're like, oh shit, like what's happening now? So I have this thing where I just basically think to myself, I don't have to, like I don't have to participate really in this fight, like these guys are doing what they're doing and that's fine. But I can appreciate the fact that if we lost these people, we would, I think, unquestionably be in a worse position overall. Because then there aren't enough of these people left, and then there's nobody to sort of, show up and say, some stuff that maybe people don't want to hear sometimes. But I think it's fine, like, if you want to push back and criticize it or whatever, like, I think that's totally fine. And I also know Duncan as somebody who, like, I think if you approach him, it's going to sound weird maybe, but if you approach him in the right way, I think Duncan can be a super reasonable person to talk with. But yeah, obviously, if you come swinging at him, he is going to go super nuclear, especially on social media, right? And I think that's the experience. I think this is another thing that people should just maybe know. The Duncan on social media is really not the same person that he is in person. Not that he's not faking it like that. I think maybe in some sense, like a lot of other people, like, they think that there has to be like this one-to-one match with, like, who you are on the internet and who you are in real life. And I think for a lot of people, especially people who grew up with the internet like a little bit earlier than the current generation, that's just not the case. Like, a lot of people, feel like, well, it's just like an outlet for me to say crazy shit and do things and just kind of like, So I try not to take it too seriously anyway, whatever is happening on social media. But yeah, I mean, like, for me, but I would also say to Duncan, like, if I was in the room, if we were on an analyst desk and Duncan said, Fallen might be one of the most overrated players of all time or something like that, I would say, hold on, that cannot be true, like, but then we could probably also have an interesting discussion about it, right?
Yeah.
Because also the thing is, like, how the fuck do we define this, right? Like, I don't know how we would do that in terms of, like, there are so many subjective things going into it, but I would probably challenge that view, and I would probably say, I don't know about that. I think there's a, but again, like, I'm also biased because Fallen's style of warping is my favorite style, basically. So,
And also, I mean, to me, the fact that he was in-game leading and he was the second best player in the world right after Cold Zero is mental.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he was able to do it, like, being an in-game leader and being the second best player in the world, to me, is just absolutely absurd that it happened. And to quote the tweet, because you said that you're not sure how it sounded exactly, he said, Fallen is the most overrated player in the history of CSGO.
Okay,
has
CSGO.
never even has never even been the best player on any lineup, but people try to make it sound like the guy was Zidane. And Tas replied to that saying, Zidane is pretty accurate. and then there was Simple saying, most overrated player in the history of CSGO? Fuck off. And that started the whole drama that happened between him and Simple. And yeah, I mean, I get his point of view, and I would say overall, I agree, Fallen was overrated. To me, he was overrated. He was one of the best in-game leaders, but overall, looking at 2015, 2016, he was great. He was still overrated when we look at 17, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
He was just not as good as he used to be.
That's fair.
And statistics show it, because I watched the whole video of him. I agree with that take, but I'm just not sure about the whole, like, the most overrated player.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a big statement to make. That's what I mean. I can agree with the fact that he's overrated maybe a bit.
Yeah.
But when we put overrated, fairly rated, and underrated, I would say there are a lot of players that we can make a case for being the most overrated in the history of the game, especially when we are talking about one of the legends of the game, right? So
yeah. I mean, I think it's it's always going to be a really tough conversation. But you're right. Like, I mean, obviously, the trouble is, especially when you're like, people got to remember, like, Fallen was sort of a legend before CS:GO. You know, like he was already like, you know, so in a way, the legacy of how epic everything Fallen has kind of done is, it's, you know, that might outlast the actual results, you know, by a long. So there is probably a case to be made there where when you're talking about, you know, being overrated, but it's also a question of, like, you know, well, overrated by who, right? Like, the Brazilian fans are obviously gonna love Fallen forever, basically, right? Like, so there is, so that might play into it, and obviously that's a whole separate line of, like, a whole separate war that Duncan has going on with the Brazilian fan base, you know, which again I try to stay far away from. But you know, so there's probably something there that, you know, that Duncan also has maybe like a closer relationship to than I even do. Because for me, I'm like, I don't feel like I don't interact with a lot of people who say that Fallen is like the best, you know, ever, or you know, like, but it's possible that Duncan does in a different way. So anyway, yeah, for me, I value these kind of friendships that I have with people who are a little bit more, you know, aggressive in that sense, because, like I said, put it another way, if I wanted real feedback from somebody, if I said, Duncan, I need you to tell me about this thing that I'm doing. I've made a piece of content. I'm doing some casting. I'm trying to be, you know, like, do something. Can you tell me what do you think about this? I trust Duncan to tell me, even if it's bad, and say this is not good enough or whatever. And that's valuable. You know?
He strikes me. I don't know him personally. I think I'm blocked, most likely. I mean, obviously, because like there was this situation that he was blocking everyone, so most likely I was blocked as well, and then maybe I got unblocked or something. Okay, yeah, there is a shot. There is a shot of that. I mean, to me personally, he strikes me as a person who is brutally honest, and that's a very valuable skill, I would say. Like, even if he says something that maybe people don't agree with, at least he's saying something that to him is just brutal honesty. And I value that a lot, because I prefer someone told me, yeah, you fucked it up, than people saying to me, yeah, it wasn't that bad, honestly, or something like that. Like, it's just way better. So that's definitely something good. But to maybe go into a bit, because I also don't want to waste your time that much, I want to get into the questions from fans, and there's a bit of them. So I will ask my last questions that I have. I have two of them. Those are the quick ones. We are just going to answer yes or no, but it's not a specific yes or no. It's more of a just name the player when I ask you the question, okay? Who do you miss the most in the CS scene from the retired players, sorry?
I almost instantly said Simple, but he hasn't retired. But
technically, yeah.
I hope he doesn't. I really miss Simple. I really don't think when people it's kind of bothering me now. Like, I should go on a podcast with Duncan and make this point, really. But like, when people have this conversation about like who is the GOAT or whatever, I'm like, you guys don't understand how good Simple was. You if you ask the question, you don't understand what he was doing. And for me, I'm like, I miss that kind of Counter-Strike. Like, I really still think Simple could do a lot in this game if he found the right motivation and, you know, like, came back in the right lineup or whatever. I'm sure that's super hard to do. Like, obviously his life is in, you know, kind of a weird state in many ways, right? Like there's the whole Ukraine situation, and then just generally like, you know, it's like it's probably very hard when, you know, you have the money, you've already won the major, you like there's all these things, but you know, in a way, like his handling of the game is so unique, and it's like, yeah, it's really like watching a slightly crazy artist go to work and just create something that even the best like art school student could never make, right? Like, so somebody who's been to school and has learned all the techniques, and like, yeah, that person can make something really cool and really good, and it's good, but they just couldn't do what Simple's doing, is my opinion. So, but he's not retired, so I guess we can't really, you know, I would say if I had to pick one person, probably Forrest.
Okay.
Like Forrest is, again, he's a natural Counter-Strike player, and I really love him. So, you know, yeah, Forrest.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, and that's why I agree with, and I like your Simple pick. That's why I agree that he's a bit of a, like when people say Michael Jordan of CSGO, he's exactly like Michael Jordan of CSGO. Like everyone is saying Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Everyone is saying Simple is the GOAT. I mean, there are some people saying, oh yeah, but still, like when you look at it from this perspective, the story is very similar. He started at the very young age. Then he goes on to this break, but we miss the story when he comes back and he wins the major.
Yeah,
that's when that's when it gets really like, you know, like the next level crazy. I mean, you know, it could happen. I wish it happens.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't end up in this close to Markelov. I would say I love Markelov, everything about him as well. But he did have this a little bit of a break he had, and he came back and he wasn't as good as he was.
Yeah.
And if it happens to Simple, that would be heartbreaking, because I'm not sure if I'm gonna get used to Simple being top 25 player in the world, not top 1. That would be weird to see, especially as we know how dominant he was once he, you know, was the best in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with what you said. And also the second question that I have, we spoke a bit about who was the maybe most overrated. Who do you think is the most underrated player in the world for you right now? Tough question.
Underrated is really, really hard to say, isn't it? Damn.
I mean, maybe maybe someone who crosses your mind instantly. It doesn't have to be. When you hear the word underrated,
the first person I think of when I think of underrated is Shush.
Okay.
I think there's such a lack of players who are willing to kind of do anything you ask of them, and from what I can tell, with no complaint. And Shush, I think, actually has he's not, obviously, Shush isn't going to be like, you know, the next Nico or Donk or somebody like that, but he actually is mechanically really good. Like, I think he's like a rare mix of like someone you can put in a bad role in the team, or but if he ever ends up in a 1 versus 2, there's a pretty good chance Shush wins those. Like, he's you know, so he's somebody like that for me, where I'm like, I never really understood it, that, you know, like Tess is, again, like he's obviously doing really good now in Falcons. That's really cool. But for me, when I look at him, I'm like, when I look at Shush, I'm like, why wasn't there more of a hunger to really work with this guy? So that's something for me. Yeah, I think he's probably the first name that comes to mind. Right this second. Man, underrated players is hard, isn't it?
Okay. I mean, yeah, it is. It definitely is, and it was never an easy question. But I just wanted to, you know, to just ask this question to see who would you pick. I would say, me personally, I would say Zershin, probably. To me, at least, he is very underrated, because it just feels every single time we watch him, and I don't know, we are at the end of the game, it's 12 to, I don't know, 10. He has like 25 kills, and I'm like how the fuck does he have 25 kills? Like, how did it happen? And then I rewatch the game and see, okay, it's not an easy. Those are not easy kills. He does get very valuable kills. So to me, it would be Zershin, probably. So yeah,
I wonder, like, I was gonna say, like, there are a couple, like maybe a couple other players that kind of sort of come to mind a little bit for me. I think Madden, coming out of that Falcons project, I think probably at least to me, showed me that this guy can really fulfill some interesting roles that a lot of teams need. Like, I think he's a really strong player. Maybe at a slightly lower level right now, but I'm not really giving up on this idea yet. I obviously now I think he's not playing for the team right now, but Diha over at Ents, like, I swear I've seen him play like really, really smart Counter-Strike, and also like mechanically better Counter-Strike. Like I don't know what's actually, I don't know what the story is behind him. Or is it Monty, right? Benched Monty, yeah.
He's benched right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I mean, he decided to bench himself, I think.
Yeah, that was the story, right? Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what more is there. But so I was gonna say, when he was with Ents, right, I remember thinking like, damn, like for me, it's really rare that you get to see Counter-Strike players where you can actually kind of almost follow their thinking process and how they like go into like certain situations, and you can see like he's making like all the right choices. And there were like definitely some ends games I remember with Dihan when I thought this is exactly like what I want to see. So I hope that he finds a way. I don't know if it's, yeah, maybe he's another player that I would think was underrated. Anyway, those are some of the names there,
Okay, I'm surprised that we picked a Polish player. I was like, yeah, not gonna be a Polish player there, for sure not. But yeah, I'm glad that we have someone. So yeah, that's good.
I think he's got. Yeah, I don't know what the story is, but I kind of hope I hope that he comes back and plays at like a, at a higher level again. Because I kind of want to be able to prove, because I've been saying it for a while, that he's like a really, really smart player. I kind of want to be able to prove, to people, I'm like, listen, I told you guys, So
yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, you also had this thing that I remember, just quickly before we go into the questions from the fans. You also had this thing because you said to me that there could be a situation where you put the same duo of casters in the same final 4 times in a row or something. I remember me watching you and Semler, and there was this thing you used to say. I'm not sure if it was specifically you, but definitely you as a duo, that you would remind people that weren't used to CS that those X-rays that they are there. Like players don't see them, and I remember like listening to that. I think I heard it 5th times or 6th time, but it was it's something that you look back and you're like smiling about it. But it definitely helped to someone who's watching for the first time or second time, he's like, okay, now I understand why they behave in such a way, and it definitely helped. So yeah, just a quick off top. Okay, we do have some questions. First of all, which tournament you won't forget till the end of your life? So I would say that the question is like the most memorable tournament that you had.
Most memorable tournament. Oh, it's rough.
No, for sure. I mean, you have a lot to choose, so.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pick a few, right? The top 3 or something.
Top 3. I think it probably will be. It might be like something like Cologne 2015, and then maybe the Atlanta major with where the Charlotte's winning. Probably some of the best ones. And then I think if I had to pick like 2 more, it probably would be MLG, and then I think like the Krakow one for the crowd aspect, even if the event had other problems, like that still is kind of crazy. So probably that's probably something like a top 4-ish kind of feeling. It's hard. That's a hard one. That's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be a lot of hard questions.
Yeah.
And the second one is, I would say, even harder. The caster that you admire the most right now in the scene.
Yeah, that's a very hard question.
Yeah, I know.
When I listen to other people do casting, I recognize that everybody has, their own style. So the problem is, at least in my brain, if I had to do the job of like matching 2 different casters against each other, it's a kind of a conversation that doesn't really make a lot of sense a lot of the time, for me at least. It's a little bit like saying if you have someone who's like a jazz musician and then in a rock band, and you try and say who's playing the best music, and you're like, I don't know, like they're not even doing necessarily the same thing. So for me, that's always a little bit hard to think about. But I mean, we already talked about Scrawny, right? Like, and I think he's got a crazy talent for finding like a particular rhythm and a pace for like building up things, and like it just works super well. So that's definitely a big part of it. I think not necessarily, obviously, I guess most people would say that he's like a, you call him a color caster, right? But someone like, I think for me, it's really evident that Chad kind of lives inside of the game, for better or worse. But it also means that, his like appreciation for the small things in the game and like noticing a bunch of, I think is really cool and really like probably unmatched in my opinion. That means a lot to me, as someone who also loves the game a lot and you know, and spends probably way too much time thinking about it. So that's really enjoyable for me. But on the other side, I can never say this sentence without making it sound like I'm being very patronizing. But one of the things I love about Harry is that he's just so excited about the game. He is just like raw emotion about the joy of Counter-Strike, and that is an insane quality to me. That means so much to me when I'm listening to a broadcast like that, and I can tell this guy's just in love with the game. You know, he's just so happy to be here. It always sounds like I'm saying that's the only thing that he brings that is not, but there is that to it. So you know, yeah. But I mean, the big problem in Counter-Strike is we have way too many good people. You know, like, so.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do. I would say in the scene, like the English international scene. Yeah, that definitely is the case. What was your favorite clutch to cast? That's a tough one as well. I mean, people are obviously saying about, because of the, you know, I'm Polish, we are biased. 1v5 Neo Dignitas. You know, a lot of people are saying. I mean, yeah, it was. But there are a lot of cast. Like when I think about the cast that you had, like that you casted specifically, I don't want to put you words in your mouth, but I would say if I were you, I would probably choose somewhere. I mean, there's Shocks versus Luminosity that was insane on Inferno 1v4. There is also very underrated. You probably don't remember it, but there was also TAS 1v3. On Face It 2014 versus Titan, and he defused last second on 15-7. The score was 15-7, I believe. He defused it last second, and they came back and they won. And yeah, it happened. I will send you after interview this clutch. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy this clutch, because you even said it. So you said so. Your words were, yeah, so GG, it's over, and then he went, he killed 1, he killed 2, he killed 3, and he defused, and it was like, okay, it's not over yet. Yeah.
I think the Neo one on Overpass actually was an insane moment. Like that was. Really,
I mean, it was to win the game, right? So
yeah. He literally clutched their way into the grand final, right? Like it was insane. That might be one of them. I think the other one is probably going to be the Cobblestone one, like the Freiburg clutch on Cobblestone on the A side, I think it was. Like there was like, I think they happened like almost like back to back. You know, it's like the.
What you mean a 1v2 versus Fnatic, or do you mean a Cloud9 one? Because there were 2 on A side.
Yeah. Which one was it? It must have been. There were 2.
I mean, there was this one that he turned around instantly, and he aimed on the second guy and he killed him. It was a major grand final.
I think there's one of them where it's like Freiburg gets the kill and Exist essentially runs away. I think, and they run out of time. Like they just don't have time to find Exist at the end, I think.
Yeah. So it's versus Cloud9. We talked about it today.
Yes.
We talked about it. That's when we said that most likely they wouldn't have won the major if he didn't do it.
Yeah. I think that one for me probably is that probably is one of the, because again, like it's just such a crazy scenario.
And that's his favorite clutch as well, because he said on the interview that his favorite clutch is this one.
Yeah, I think that was a really, and also like there was just a lot going into that, like the story around and everything. So probably one of those 2, I think is, but it's, man, that's hard to say, right? Like there's probably a ton of simple ones in there that I just kind of forget over time, right? So who knows, you know? But like, yeah, off the top of my head, those are a couple of them.
Okay. This question is going to be a fun one. What's the biggest fuck up that happened during the casts that you had? Maybe people don't know about it. Maybe people know about it. Like it could be something really funny, something, maybe serious. I don't know. Like, it's your choice.
I mean, there's been, I think typically obviously you try to do the best you can when there is a fuck up to just kind of pretend like nothing is happening. There's definitely been events where suddenly like the TV that we're looking at to like try and cast the game, some TVs have like an auto turn off function if like nobody touches anything for a while, and suddenly it's like 20 seconds, and then you talk to the production crew and you say, hey, our TV's gonna turn off in like 20 seconds, and then they're like, oh, we'll send somebody, and it's like the TV turns off and you're like, oh, now I have to try and pretend like I'm still just talking, but at the same time if I don't say why I'm not talking about the game, I also sound like kind of an idiot. So you're hoping that it's gonna work out any minute now. So there's probably been moments like that. I'm trying to think about like really big kind of screw ups where it's been. I don't know if weirdly not a lot come to mind. Something I mean for a while. In the beginning, I remember Semler has this like habit of. Like Semler shows up to like when the game goes live, like 2 minutes before the game is live, basically. You know, so it's like the desk is on talking, the production crew is saying like, "Hey, where's Semler?" And I'm like, "Yeah, listen, he's gonna be here in a second," you know. And I remember in the beginning they were like, I was very stressed about it, and then after a while I was like, you know what, I'm not like his parent or anything. I'm not gonna worry about this. I'm just not gonna, you know, if he's late, he's late, and I will just start talking, you know. So there are probably some moments there where like it was cutting it super, super close. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think if there would have been any like really massive fuck ups. The thing is as well, like I think in the beginning of Counter-Strike, it was such a different environment that even if there were fuck ups, nobody cared because. The truth is in the beginning of CSGO, like people would stay like at the hotel bar till like 5 in the morning, and then they would go and sleep for like 3 hours, and then they would wake up and cast Counter-Strike on like 3 hours of sleep and not feeling like, you know, but it was just like a different environment. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying, but it probably was a little bit too much like rock and roll, kind of like, hey, let's go guys, you know, we're just all here to have, you know, like there's a little bit too much of that perhaps.
It's still happening, just not in maybe international Counter-Strike or something, but me personally being from Poland, it's still happening. Trust me.
Yeah, but I think on the international stage, like people kind of like at some point it was like people started saying like, hey, listen, this is too crazy, you know, like we have to rein it back in a little bit here. So I think there probably were a lot of moments like that where people, you know, where there were like lots of things that could, but again, like the tolerance for people fucking up was also just different, you know. But yeah, weirdly nothing really huge comes to mind. That's kind of interesting actually. There are
not crazy stories from our after parties or anything like that. Okay,
oh, I mean, in that sense, like obviously the biggest fuck up is me destroying my knee by dancing with Sipniks on my back.
Really?
Yeah, that's
what year was it?
This was in 2015 when my son had just been born, like, you know, 2 weeks earlier, and I went to like the major or whatever it was, and yeah, I went to like a nightclub with, you know, everybody, and I was, you know, we were all dancing. I don't love dancing, but I had a lot to drink, you know. And we were all dancing and having a good time, and for some reason, like, you know, Sip like jumped on my back, and I was like carrying him, and obviously he's like a much smaller or at least a much lighter guy than me, so I was like, you know, I was like dancing, like I was holding his legs and I was like dancing or some shit, and then I took like one wrong step and it just snapped like two different ligaments in my knee, and I had to go to the hospital, and you know, I came home on crutches and told my wife, I was like, hey, I actually didn't tell my wife. I said to her, like, I had fallen on some stairs. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't tell her, listen, your husband is such an idiot that instead of being like ready to come home and take care of like his, you know, his newborn son, he actually went to party with the guys and just wanted to be, you know, like, you know, I was so embarrassed. Like it was years later until I told her. And I said, like, listen, I'm going to be honest. I've kept this from you, and it's not because, you know, it's just pure embarrassment, and obviously I'm sorry and everything. Like, yeah.
What was her reaction when she first heard it?
She so this is the funniest shit. So the German ambulance service sent us an invoice for, you know, for which wasn't that bad. It was like 200 euros or something, you know. They sent us an invoice for taking me to the fucking hospital at 4 in the morning or something. And we got that, and on the invoice it actually says where they took you from and to, and obviously the place that they took me from is a nightclub. So she was like, she basically said, like, man, I always knew that there was something, you know, kind of weird about this story, and I just, you know, didn't, you know, say anything about it or whatever, and that, you know, but she kind of already had like some idea of it, and I was like, damn, I'm so stupid. Like, why didn't I just say, like, obviously, yeah, it's embarrassing, yeah, it's you know, it's super cringe and stupid, but just say it. Just say, hey, listen, I did something really fucking dumb, but, you know, but I really in the moment felt like I'm I'm like the worst. I'm the worst person in the world, you know, because obviously she kind of needed my help when I got home, and then, you know, I had to be on crutches for a really long time. You know, it's like yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, that is obviously that is no question the biggest fuck up of all time. Funny also in many ways now. I mean, like it is, but but you know,
yeah,
that was crazy.
That's a great story. I love that story. Yeah, absolutely.
Wild.
Okay, this question is gonna be a bit personal, but the question is how during the like years from 2014 to probably now, even 2025, what was the pay for your, like, I don't know, let's say per day as a caster in like ESL, Blast, PGL, and so on?
Yeah, it's always very hard to. The reason why it's hard to talk about is because, one, you always put yourself in a position if you start saying a lot of numbers where people are gonna have a lot of opinions about it. I would say that the first event I ever did, I was paid like 500 Danish kroner, which is like, I don't even know, like
it's like probably 50 zloty or yeah, because
it's like 70 USD-ish, you know.
Yeah. Glaive got fined one time 8,000, I think, Danish crowns because of the girlfriend stuff that happened in the tournament.
That's funny you remember that. That's crazy. That was one of the stupidest moments ever. Yeah, but so that was like my first ever event, right? And then I think the first DreamHack I did, I think I got paid like something like 250 euros a day ish. Okay. And I had no idea if that was a lot or a little. Like, I didn't ask anybody, or like I didn't have an agency or anything. I just said, oh yeah, whatever, you know. Like, truth is, I would have done it for free, right? Because like it's such a big opportunity, right? That you just think like I have to be here no matter what. So I wasn't gonna argue that. And then basically we just tried to like negotiate the level up and up and up over time, right, to try and make it you know, better and better. But the problem in talking about numbers is really that, one, it's not just like how much you're getting paid a day, it's also how many days can you even work in a month, right? Because for my job, if I could work like, you know, 20 hours, or like not 20 hours, if I could work like 20 days out of the month, or 25 or whatever, then it would be an insane job in terms of income. But so that's on the one side. The other side is that I don't know what everybody else is doing, but for me, because I travel around the world so much, and like my job is so time consuming, at least for me, it means my wife is basically like, if she also had to have a job, she would be like, it would not work, right? Like, she would be at home with you know, we have 2 kids now. She would have to be at home, and then she would have to get up at like, you know, 6 in the morning to take care of them and put them in school and do all these other things. And then she would come home and like, she would like, and I'm not even in the country, right? Like, I'm somewhere else, right? So she would be sort of like it just is on, you know, really unworkable. So for me, at least in my life, we basically rely on my income traveling around the world and casting, to sort of make it work. So effectively, I sort of can, you know, cut my day rate in half and say, well, that's, you know, essentially paying 2 people, you know, in the way that my life is structured. But I mean, we did a lot of work to make things better, right? And you know, at some point we definitely crossed the sort of the 1,000 euro a day mark. And I think, you know, it's a big conversation about like what's fair and reasonable, and how much can you get out of it. But again, like the problem is you have to look at these numbers through the filter of, sometimes you only have 1 event in 2 months. And in that case, you know, even if your day rate is, you know, 2,000 euros a day, which mine isn't, but if it was, like, even that might be like, yeah, so what? Like, you know, effectively, for me at least, you know, maybe you make like, you know, a lot of money in that, you know, in that 5-day span, but then you have no idea if you're going to be making any money in the next 2 or 3 months at all. So that's why I think it's a hard conversation for most people to have, is because if you just say a big number, a lot of people are going to say, Jesus Christ, like, why are these guys complaining about anything ever, you know? And we are getting paid pretty well, I'm not going to lie. Like, obviously, I'm not complaining, but it's, you know, I can see the danger for most people in trying to be open and forward with it, because the whole context around it makes it kind of hard to, you know, to appreciate. And also, I live in Denmark, we pay 50% tax on everything, so screw that.
No,
we're getting right. But anyway, like,
wait, 50%?
Well, it's it's like, I think I pay, is it 42, and then there's like another market income tax that puts it at like basically something like, it's like, I think mine is like 48 or 49 or something.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I thought I was getting screwed, but now I feel a bit better about this one. At least that's that. Yeah,
it is what it is.
I mean, in Poland we have something like if you are 26 years old at maximum, you don't pay taxes, but then after 26 you pay taxes. That's basically it.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not even complaining. I don't mind paying taxes. I think the issue from the real problem with income and working as a caster is the fact that you just don't know what the future looks like. You have no idea.
Yeah.
And that is the harder part of it, right? Like, I think most people in the space right now would say, man, if I could make less money but have more security, I would, you know. So.
Okay, that's why I'm gonna ask you this question, because probably this is gonna be the toughest one. What's next for Anders right now? I mean, we are in 2025.
Yeah.
Basically March.
Yeah.
What's next?
What's next? Well, it's been, I mean, the last almost like 3-4 months or something like that have been kind of crazy for me, right? And just in terms of, you know, like I said, the big problem is you don't really know what the future looks like. And obviously you try and talk to different organizations. You say like, hey, you know, is there some work available? I started doing that around like, what would have been like October? No, yeah. So sort of middle of October, I started reaching out to a bunch of people and saying like, hey, next year, what's going on? Like there are a lot of tournaments, right? All these different organizers are coming back. Let's have different conversations about like, you know, what's available, what can I do, what can I offer, what's the, you know, what's going on basically. And I think for the first time ever really in my career, I had like I kind of bumped into this, what was sort of more of like a feeling of, well, you know, we don't really know. And, you know, we're not really ready to have those conversations or something. And I thought that's like, if not now, then kind of when, you know? And a lot of people were saying, well, on the other side of the major. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that makes sense, you know? So then, you know, I kept trying. And then, you know, once we got to the other side of the major, I thought, okay, like I'm still kind of getting the same response. And when you get that response, you sort of know, like that just means you're not you're not part of the people. You're not, like at that point, you're not part of the group of people who are getting hired for it, basically. And that was, you know, that's hard to deal with, right? I also had a huge problem at the end of 24, which was that some of the really big events I was supposed to work at got cancelled. So when an event gets cancelled, there's nothing you can really do as like a, you know, as a caster. But it also means you probably said no to other events to do, you know, the first event. And then when that event gets cancelled, you can't really say yes to the, you know, whatever other thing you were getting offered that's already done, you know? So I had like a massive, massive hole in my economy already. That, you know, that kind of just, you know, and then when you start talking to people and everyone says, well, we're not going to be able to hire you, you know, or effectively say that. That's really, really concerning, right? Like that's the kind of thing where you're like, ooh, damn, like I'm on really thin ice and I didn't even know, you know? So yeah, that was scary. And then obviously I spent, I would say, probably a couple of weeks at the start of December feeling really, really bad about all of this, you know? Just feeling like this is unfair and I don't feel good. And, you know, look at all the work I've done over all these years. And like, it can't be the case that there's just no open doors here. Like what's happening, right? But then also the problem is that attitude like doesn't open any doors, right? It doesn't. So then I thought, okay, I've got to think about this a different way. I have to turn it around in my brain and I've got to say, was there something I could have done in the last 2 or 3 years to make it so that I had better opportunities now and that I was in a stronger position? Yeah. And I realized, yeah, obviously, there's a ton of things I could have done. So then I started thinking, well, I have to start doing those now and just kind of hope that things work out, you know? Which is, again, it's scary to just rely on that hope or whatever. So anyway, like that's what I started doing streaming and some content. And basically my thought is that I got very disconnected from the community because, you know, I think in the past, like we talked about all these different years of like, you know, 2015, 16, whatever. Like I think back then I was much more in the community as like a person who was like out doing content and podcasts and very many other things. And then, you know, again, like I had 2 kids. I started a company called Skybox. I did like there's a million things that happened in this time span. You know, we didn't even get to the part, but like you know, at some point my dad died of cancer in like you know in 2018, and like there's like all these crazy things happened in my life, and I think that just had a big effect on my ability to be more of like an outward person. And logically, I assume most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm doing, right? Because people have their own lives and their own problems, and you know, and so. But the issue with that is that if nobody is kind of like if there's no fan group of people who are saying, you know, we kind of want Anders at events, or we really want him back or something, then there's no pressure for anyone to work with you. And I realized at some point, like, hey, I need to remind my fans that I'm still out here and I'm doing things. And that was the first thing that I kind of wanted to do. And then, you know, and then I also realized through doing that there's a lot of the Counter-Strike stuff that I'm missing. Like, I've actually enjoyed sitting down to watch games and just have because the truth is, like, it's a sad truth, but the truth is, if you ask me at the middle of last year to give like strong opinions about certain teams, there are a lot of the teams that I could probably bullshit my way through some opinions about, you know, and say like, well, you know, we know this guy, that guy, whatever, but they're not really necessarily my own opinions. Like they would have been like, you know, sort of, yeah, you know, I remember something about, you know, how mouse play, and I can tell you something about that, you know, but that's not the same as having the real, like, firsthand. I've looked at it and I have, you know, my own feelings about how this team plays, and I have like, I care about how they play, and I want to know how am I playing differently from FaZe on these maps and all that. Like, that's the kind of, you know, stuff that I think, you know, again, like, life just became too busy. And so anyway, all of this kind of made me go through a lot of that again, and I'm really in a way I'm thankful for that. Like, I'm not thankful for the stress that came with it. That's hard.
Yeah.
But truth is, without the stress, I wouldn't have done it, right? Like, without the stress, things would have just kept going, and that's, you know, it's annoying to have to admit that, but that's probably the truth. So anyway, like, now I've had, you know, and then at the start of the year, Henry sort of said to me that he was feeling like, you know, also I think pretty stressed out, and just kind of wanted to explore options, I think, both in his own life and just in terms of, you know, casting and everything else. I think he just wanted to kind of like find a, you know, a more relaxed situation than, you know, than having to sort of say it has to be, you know, only Anders and Henry and that's it, you know. So, and that's obviously that's totally fair and reasonable, and I like Henry, and, you know, like, we had a good conversation, I think. So basically, you know, I have some new you know, plans that are coming up, and I think it's going to be exciting. And there are some events that have reached out now and are kind of saying, hey, listen, we're you know, we're kind of open to doing some things again, and that's really cool. And you know, I've got to give a shout out to like the CCT people who hired me to do a bunch of the online stuff. If they hadn't done that, it would have been very, very hard for me to not essentially completely, like, you know, like, dig up my whole life basically and start over. That would have been rough. So they kind of saved me in a big way, right? So yeah, but like, it's stressful, but some good has come of it too. And maybe it was important. Maybe I just needed, you know, that lesson. Unfortunately, I think life is like that sometimes. But yeah, I would say I'm way more positive about the future now than I was a month ago, and infinitely more than I was 2 months ago. So that's good, you know.
Has retirement ever crossed your mind? Like for real? Like that you felt like, yeah, maybe I just may retire and that's it?
The problem is the truth is, like, I really love casting Counter-Strike. Like, it's a huge source of like joy and excitement in my life, you know. So it's very hard for me. There are other things that I'd want to do. Those are just, they're hard things to get to, and I don't really necessarily know how to find a way into those places. Like, I have a big dream to do game development, and I think I could be really good at it, and I think I could contribute a lot, but, you know, I'm not an artist or a coder or anything. So when I think about those things, I think maybe I just have to learn coding, you know. Maybe I should sit down and learn how to do React or something else, and just kind of like start there and then work my way up or whatever. But again, these are that's not like a choice you make and just say, oh, I'm going to start that on Monday and then, you know, quit my job on casting or whatever. So in a way, no, retirement isn't something that I'm really thinking about, because it means a lot to me. I love the game and I love casting, and I think, you know, the only time that I think I would say it's time to retire is, one, if I have a feeling that I show up for broadcasts and it's just a job and it's just like, oh, here we are, I'm back at work, oh, it's just work, you know. That would be really bad, I think. And or if people that I know in the community start to say, hey, listen, this is, you know, I think you're just, it doesn't sound like the same energy, it doesn't sound like the same kind of thing, you know, and it's getting a bit like, you know, maybe it's time, you know. That I think I would take pretty seriously, and start to say, okay, because at the same time, like I said, I have this, what's a good way to describe it? I don't know. I have a certain like reverence for the game of Counter-Strike, and I think I've tried to do a lot in 12 years to elevate it and to build it in terms of casting, in terms of, like I said, bringing a lot of other people into casting and event work in general, like a lot more people than I think people maybe realize. And we built Skybox, which is now being used by almost every team in the top 30. And I feel like a lot of my mission for like a long time has been to try and make the game, you know, better and more fun and more interesting, and kind of like build it over a long time, the part that I could, you know. If I ever found myself in a position where now I was pulling in the other direction, by just showing up as like a legacy kind of person who's like, oh yeah, that's Anders, it's good, you know, good, like whatever. I don't want to do that ever. So if I ever get a sense that that's happening, I'm gonna find a way to say, okay, that's it, you know. But yeah, for now, I feel, my feeling is that I've got a lot of stuff to offer, you know, and especially now, maybe more so than in the last couple of years, my feeling is that like I've got kind of a, you know, a new sort of appreciation for a lot of things, that a lot of things that I think a lot of other people aren't noticing in the game right now, in part because it's hard to notice because you're spending so much time on the road and everything's hard to sit down and like really pay attention to like some of the finer details of the game. It just is, you know. But I've had that time, so now I feel like I can contribute some fun stuff again.
Okay.
Long answer.
I mean, that's perfect, because I heard once, I think Freakazoid said that if retirement ever crosses your mind, you should probably retire. And I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
I'm glad it hasn't crossed your mind, because when I heard that quote from him, and when I was casting League of Legends, I was like, yeah, I thought about it a few months ago, and I'm like, yeah, I'm still casting. Like, is there a point of that? And then I listened to his quote, and I was like, yeah, it's time to retire. And yeah, I did, and I still miss. I would love to cast CS. Like, to me, it would be a dream come true. In Polish and English, it doesn't really matter. I just hadn't had that opportunity, and that's why I focus on YouTube. But that's why I envy you in that sense, that not even the tournament or something, that the fact that you actually were able to do it is just so huge. And
I'll say this though, I think the future of casting most esports games is not going to be about doing what I did, which is obviously just like it is a bit crazy, where you just kind of like end up doing it full time and you travel around the world, and like it is a sick idea, but I think the future is probably going to be actually doing it almost the way that it sounds like you're doing it, which is you actually have a YouTube channel, you have other things that you can do, because the problem is, again, relying on the casting alone, at least right now, is not a sustainable position to be in. It just is not. Like, so I imagine that a lot of future casters probably actually will be people who have like, you know, big Twitch streams, big YouTubes, and then they can, you know, maybe they can go and learn some of the casting stuff, and they can kind of like build a bridge there, and maybe it becomes like a co-streaming / casting mix. I don't know, but I think it's gonna be very hard, at least for right now, to be a full-time commentator and just only rely on that and nothing else. Or if you do it, it's gonna be very stressful. So, you know, maybe in the future esports will grow so much that will change. But my feeling is that right now it's not a good position to be in. Put it like that.
Yeah, I get it. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it from the questions. I just want to say thank you for this interview. I know I told you, yeah, it's going to be an hour or so. It was almost 3 So yeah, I mean there are a lot of questions that I wanted to make sure that that I put into this interview, and it's been a pleasure. I hope that I'm gonna see you at the biggest tournaments that there are for CS majors, not only majors, CCT, and all of the others one, because I want to see that. I love other casters too, but I just want to hear you again at the not only at majors, just just like a regular tournament would be also cool, just to hear your thoughts. I know that you co-streamed, right, the PGL tournament.
Yes, yeah, some of it at least. Yeah, what I could. Yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's great, and I wish you nothing but the best. I hope that the questions were all right as well. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate it. It was a really fun walk down memory lane and everything. So like super cool. I appreciate it too. And yeah, and again, like if your audience and if people have more questions in the future or whatever, like I'm pretty much always available. You can write me on Twitter or whatever. Like my DMs are open. It's easy to find me. So yeah, if people have questions or whatever, that's always available.
Yeah, I won't put your Discord name on public.
Maybe not.
It's gonna be a secret.
Yeah,
no worries.
Good idea. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and obviously thank you also to our sponsors of this podcast who are always supportive, and they help us a lot. And yeah, hopefully we're gonna hear each other in the next interview. So yeah, bye guys.